are about to learn the exact mechanics of your own core. I want you to imagine your soul right now as a compass needle.
Right.
But it's caught in this massive, completely invisible magnetic storm. It's spinning frantically. It's twitching and reacting to just every single stimulus thrown at it.
Yeah, the ping of a late-night email.
Exactly. The emails or the sudden shift in your partner's mood, the underlying grinding financial pressures. It's the endless, relentless demands of modern life. You are caught in a storm of noise, constantly reacting, constantly putting out fires, and you desperately need to find true north.
And finding the true north isn't about, downloading another productivity app.
No, absolutely not.
It's not about learning some new communication hack. This deep dive is about stripping away every polite, neutralized, politically correct layer you have been conditioned to wear since childhood.
Yeah, we are bypassing all of that.
This is a transmission of hard-won, visceral truth. We're going to completely bypass the intellectual fluff. We are bypassing the polite dinner party conversation. We are delivering a dopaminergic sprint straight into the raw physics of your purpose, your polarity, and your relationships. We are here to master the chaos.
Which brings us to our first core framework. I'll state the header right now so we are entirely anchored. Introduction. The evolving man and the physics of polarity.
Let's completely dismantle the illusions we've been sold about modern relationships. Because to understand the present, we really have to look at the immediate past.
Right, the historical context.
Exactly. For generations, society operated on these rigid, incredibly toxic caricatures. You had the macho jerk, the guy who dominated his household through fear, emotional distance, and financial control.
The classic tyrant.
And on the other side, you had the submissive housewife, confined, economically dependent, and emotionally manipulated. It was a suffocating one-dimensional prison for both of them.
Yeah.
Naturally, as a culture, we evolved.
Yeah.
We looked at that toxicity, we recoiled, and we moved into what we now call the 50-50 stage.
Right, the 50-50 stage. And let's be honest, on paper, this looks absolutely perfect. It's the ultimate civilized ideal we're all taught to strive for. Men embrace their inner feminine. They learn to feel, to nurture, to go with the flow, to soften up.
Which was necessary.
100% necessary. And women embraced their inner masculine. They became highly directed, financially independent, and fierce in their careers. So the bank accounts balance perfectly. The household chores are meticulously split right down the middle in a shared calendar app. You've become perfect co-managers of your existence. But here is the terrifying trap we have discovered, and it's something people are desperately afraid to admit out loud. You walk into the bedroom of that perfectly managed 50-50 life, and it feels like a sterile, fluorescent-lit corporate boardroom. You have achieved total equality, and in the exact same motion, you have completely neutralized the sexual spark.
Exactly. Because we are conflating social equality with sexual energy. Socially, legally, intellectually, equality is an absolute non-negotiable imperative. We do not endorse going backward. But sexual polarity is not a social construct. It is a physical law.
Like actual physics.
It is the exact same physics as a magnet. Think about a middle school science class.
Yeah.
You absolutely cannot generate an electrical spark by rubbing two positive poles together or two negative poles together to repel. Or, if you completely neutralize them, they just sit there dead weight.
You need a positive and a negative.
You need a north and a south. When you cling to this politically correct sameness in moments of intimacy, when you try to just be best buddies who occasionally rub genitals in bed, you short-circuit the entire system. You kill the juice. Passion, by its very biological and energetic definition, demands a difference in charge. It demands a ravisher and a ravishee.
Let's ground this. I don't want this to sound abstract for you listening. Think of it like a stadium of 100 people. We've looked at the data, we've observed the psychology in thousands of lives, and we can make this incredibly tangible. In that stadium of 100 people, maybe 10 of them have what we'd call a truly balanced essence.
Right, the 10%.
Meaning, at their absolute core, they don't actually crave the wild, chaotic storms of passionate polarity. They genuinely, deeply prefer a calm, civilized, best friend romance. And that is perfectly fine. There is zero judgment there.
Not at all.
But that leaves 90 people in that stadium. 90% of you listening right now have a distinct, polarized core, either deeply masculine or deeply feminine. And if you have a masculine core, regardless of your gender, you are fundamentally driven by a mission. You are driven by the relentless search for freedom.
Let's visualize that drive, because the masculine core experiences ecstasy in a very specific way.
Yeah.
It's the breaking of constraints. It's the visceral thrill of the arena. Picture a running back on a football field.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
He takes the ball, he's surrounded by 200-pound men trying to violently put him into the dirt. He breaks a brutal tackle, he defies gravity, he defies opposition, he puts his physical safety on the line, he faces the metaphorical death of the defense, and he crosses into the end zone. The roar of the crowd, the lifting of the weight, that is the masculine pursuit of freedom made physical. That is the ultimate high.
And the feminine core is entirely different.
Completely different. Contrast that with the feminine core. The feminine core is not driven by the breaking of constraints. It is driven by the total oceanic flow of love. It is the profound depth of romantic drama, the search for absolute emotional fullness, the desire to be entirely consumed and filled by love. You see this in the media we culturally consume.
Sports versus soap operas.
Exactly. It's the ecstasy of the edge versus the ecstasy of the ocean.
And if you deny that core, if you have a masculine core, but you try to paste a passive 50-50, whatever you want to do, honey, smile over it because you think that's what a modern person is supposed to do. Your spirit literally begins to rot. You become a hollow shell. You become deeply resentful.
You lose your spine.
So let's get straight into the mechanics of how you stop rotting and start living. I'm pulling up the next doctrine, Part 1, A Man's Way. Chapter 1. Stop hoping for a completion of anything in life.
This is where we have to perform some psychological surgery. You must immediately, and I mean today, destroy the illusion of someday. You know exactly what this voice sounds like in your head.
Oh, everyone knows it.
It's the quiet negotiator saying, when I finally make enough money, then I can relax and be present. When the kids are finally out of the house, then I'll start that business. When my partner finally stops complaining and her moods stabilize, then I'll be happy. This is a lethal mirage.
A mirage?
I want you to picture yourself crawling through a scorching, endless desert. Your lips are cracked, you're exhausted, and your eyes are locked on a shimmering oasis of completion just over the next sand dune. You drag your bleeding body to the top of the dune, and the oasis simply moves backward. It recedes. It will always recede.
Because it is never, ever going to be over. This is the fundamental masculine error, believing that the chaos of life will eventually settle into a permanent, manageable peace. It won't. As long as you have breath in your lungs, the universe is going to throw unforeseen, unfixable chaos at you. Cars will break down, markets will crash, people will get sick.
Chaos is the baseline.
So here is our high-velocity challenge to you right now today. We call it the 1-hour rule. You must spend 1 hour today doing the exact thing you love, the deepest gift you were put on this earth to give. I don't care if it's writing a book, building a piece of furniture, or studying quantum physics. No excuses about your bank account. No excuses about your family obligations. If you cannot carve out 1 single hour today to live your absolute truth, your fantasy of a free future is just that. A fantasy. You are choosing to be a slave to the future.
And if we apply this lack of completion to the feminine energy in your life, it changes everything. You have to translate feminine energy in your mind. Stop viewing it as a problem to be solved and start viewing it as a cinematic force of nature.
I love this analogy.
When your woman's emotional weather shifts, when she has complaints, when sudden storms arise, that is an ocean. You do not try to fix an ocean storm. Imagine standing on a beach with a wrench trying to tighten the bolts on a hurricane. It's absurd.
You'd look insane.
If you stand on the beach and get annoyed that the waves are crashing, you are missing the entire point of the ocean. You don't logic a wave into being flat. You must find the humor in it. You must stand in the wind, feel the immense, unpredictable, chaotic power of it, and love her straight through the center of the storm.
Which requires an immense amount of physical and emotional fortitude, leading us directly into our next headers. Chapter 2. Live with an open heart, even if it hurts. And Chapter 3. Live as if your father were dead.
Let's dissect the anatomy of getting hurt. When a project you poured your soul into collapses, when you are caught in a lie, or when your partner looks at you and coldly mocks your deepest insecurity, your biological instinct is to contract. You know the exact physical sensation.
Like a flinch.
It's like a giant invisible hand reaches into your chest and crushes your solar plexus like an empty aluminum soda can. You physically cave in, your shoulders roll forward, your breathing becomes shallow, you withdraw your energy and you hide behind your eyes. You put up a shield. But a superior man, the true samurai of relationship, does the exact opposite.
The practice here is entirely physical, and it is brutally difficult. When you feel that soda can crush in your chest, you must violently counter your own biology. You breathe deep, bypassing the constricted chest, pulling the air straight down into the belly. You physically force your shoulders back. You expose the neck. You open the entire front of your body.
You stay entirely exposed.
You do not look away at the floor. You stare directly into the eyes of the person delivering the pain. You remain a wide-open target. Now, the logical mind screams, why? Why would I stay open when I'm being attacked?
Because a closed, contracted body cannot sense the subtle shifts in the room. When you contract, you become entirely obsessed with your own defense mechanisms. A closed man is a blind, deaf man. You lose your peripheral vision, literally and metaphorically. You can only act with spontaneous, masterful intelligence when you are completely open to the hurt, feeling the full spectrum of the moment. And this brings us to one of the most insidious, hidden sources of that contraction.
The ghost of the father. This is chapter 3, and it's a psychological gut punch. We need to talk about the shadow your father casts over your life.
I want you to play a mental game with me right now. I want you to imagine that your father has just died. He is gone. The funeral is over. Now, past the grief, I want you to locate the immediate, secret, dark release that washes over you. It's there. Feel the sudden release of no longer having to live up to his unspoken expectations.
The pressure just vanishing.
Feel the sudden absence of his criticism, whether he was actually critical or whether you just internalized a critical voice hovering over your career choices, your financial status, and your relationships.
That relief you feel in that visualization, that relief is the exact precise measurement of how much you are currently holding back in your life. It is the weight of the invisible puppet strings. If you want to be a truly free man, you cannot wait for the literal funeral to feel that freedom. That is a waste of a life.
A total waste.
You must step into that terrifying, vast space of relief now. You can love the man, you can honor him, but you must completely sever the energetic cord of his judgment. You must live as if he has already gone, and you are the only author of your existence.
Which requires you to know exactly who you are when nobody is watching. Let's move to the next doctrine, chapter 4. Know your real edge and don't fake it. And chapter 5, always hold to your deepest realization.
We use the term edge a lot, but let's define it clearly. Imagine your capacity, your fear, your absolute limit as a sheer 1,000-foot cliff drop. You are standing on the plateau. Now, it is deeply, profoundly honorable to walk up to that cliff, look down into the abyss, feel the vertigo twisting your stomach, step back and admit, I am terrified of this drop. This is my absolute limit. I cannot jump today.
That is authentic.
That is knowing your edge. Do you know what is thoroughly dishonorable? What makes you toxic and untrustworthy to be around? Pretending you are floating effortlessly above the abyss when you're actually shaking in your boots? Or worse, setting up a completely safe, comfortable camp 3 miles inland where there is zero danger and loudly bragging to everyone about your bravery.
Faking your edge destroys your structural integrity. You must know exactly where your fear begins, and you must occupy that exact coordinate. If you are playing your edge, if you're just coasting in the safe zone, you are useless to other men as a sounding board, and you are inherently untrustworthy to your woman. She can smell the fake bravado.
They always know?
Always. But playing that edge requires a massive shift in pacing. It requires what we call a resolution to scale. We need to plunge from the frantic surface of daily life down into the profound deep.
Let's talk about chapter 5. Always hold to your deepest realization. Think about your day today. Think about what occupied your mind. The frantic emails, the text messages, the anxiety over a delayed bank transfer, the simmering argument over whose turn it is to take out the trash or unload the dishwasher.
All of the surface noise.
We have discovered that in the grand calculus of your existence, these are nothing but puffs of smoke. They are fleeting, meaningless vapor. If you spend your entire life grasping at puffs of smoke, constantly trying to organize the vapor, you will reach the end of your life with empty hands and a hollow chest.
You have to plunge into the deep sea of conscious loving. You have to organize your entire life, moment by moment, around eternity. If you are not anchored in that infinite depth, every task you perform is just a frantic, anxious twitch. When you are arguing about the dishwasher, you have lost your realization. You have forgotten that you're going to die, that she is going to die, and that this moment is a fleeting spark in the cosmos.
It's a profound shift in perspective.
When you hold to your deepest realization, the trivialities dissolve, and you can actually lead yourself and your partner out of the smoke and back into the deep water.
And leading requires prioritizing your true north over everything else. Let's read the next headers. Chapter 7, your purpose must come before your relationship. And Chapter 8, Lean just beyond your edge.
I know this is where we are going to trigger a lot of people because it completely contradicts modern conditioning. Society tells you to put your relationship first. Happy wife, happy life, right?
Right.
We are telling you that prioritizing your intimate relationship over your highest, absolute purpose is a betrayal.
A total betrayal of your core.
It weakens your core, it robs the world of your unique gift, and ironically, it actually cheats your partner out of the man she truly desires. If you give up your mission, if you skip the gym, abandon your art, or neglect your business, just to sit on the couch and watch Netflix with her because you think her proximity will make her happy, you are suffocating the polarity.
Let's visualize a timeline to make this concrete. Say you have an evening at home. You can give your partner 3 hours of half-hearted, distracted, compromised presence. You're sitting next to her, but you're secretly resenting being pulled away from your work. You're checking your phone. You're an energetic flatline.
Just a warm body on a couch.
Or you can give her 30 minutes of absolute, undivided, ravishing presence. 30 minutes where you put the phone in another room, where you are completely locked in, where your eye contact doesn't waver, where she is the only thing existing in the universe, and where your love physically penetrates her defenses. We guarantee you she will take the 30 minutes of ravishment every single time.
Every single.
It nourishes her oceanic core in a way that 3 hours of passive, buddy-like coexistence never will.
And that concept of penetration in Chapter 8, leaning just beyond your edge, extends outward into everything you do. The way you penetrate your woman with love and presence must be the exact same way you penetrate the world with your purpose. Whether your purpose is your career, your art, raising children, or building a business, you do not engage with it sheepishly. You do not go into the office just to survive the day, keep your head down, and extract a paycheck.
That is cowardly.
You dive into it to burst it open with your gifts. You ravish your work. You lean just beyond your edge, constantly pushing past your comfort zone to magnify consciousness in everything you touch. If you are not doing that, you're decaying.
Which is exactly why you cannot do this alone.
Moving to the next framework, Chapter 10, Enjoy Your Friend's Criticism, and Chapter 11, If You Don't Know Your Purpose, Discover It Now. We need to talk about the crucible of masculine energy. The modern friend group has often devolved into a comfortable echo chamber. You get together, you drink a beer, you complain about your boss, you complain about your wife, and your friends pat you on the back and say, yeah, man, that sucks, you're totally right.
It feels good in the moment, but it's toxic.
That is toxic comfort. The capacity to stand still, breathe deep into your belly, and absorb raw, unfiltered, brutal criticism from men you respect is the ultimate metric of your structural integrity. It is the friction that sharpens the blade.
If a close friend looks at you and says, you are acting like a coward in your business, or you are treating your partner poorly and you're hiding from your responsibilities and your reaction is to collapse, get defensive, or attack him back, you are weak. Your foundation is sand. You must crave that heat. You must invite other men to audit your life because you are blind to your own blind spots. You need that friction to stay aligned with your purpose.
Because if you don't have that friction, and if you do not know your ultimate purpose, your core is entirely empty. This is Chapter 11. You aren't a man on a mission. You are a piece of driftwood, a drifting ship at the absolute mercy of the ocean currents. You will adapt to whatever events happen to you rather than generating the events yourself.
You become reactive instead of proactive.
And listen carefully to the mechanics of this. This lack of alignment doesn't just make you bored at work. It makes you physically, spiritually, and eventually sexually impotent. A man unmoored from his purpose is a man who cannot stand erect in the face of life's challenges. If you don't know your purpose, your only purpose right now, your absolute singular mission is to discover it. You sit in an empty room, you journal, you fast, you do whatever it takes until the first breadcrumb of that purpose reveals itself.
And when you find it, you have to realize it isn't permanent. Let's look at the next headers. Chapter 12. Be willing to change everything in your life. In Chapter 13. Don't use your family as an excuse.
Finding your purpose is not a one-time checkbox event. It's not like picking a college major and you're done for life. You need to visualize your purpose as a massive three-dimensional topographical map made of concentric rings, like a target.
Like a giant archery target.
You are born, and you start on the very outermost ring. Let's say that outer ring is the career your parents implicitly wanted for you. Maybe it's becoming a lawyer, so you attack it. You go to law school, you pass the bar, you master it. And then inevitably, usually in your 30s or 40s, it becomes hollow. The passion dies. It becomes incredibly boring. The ring dissolves.
And this is where the crisis happens. Society will look at you and tell you that this dissolving ring is a failure. You quit your secure job, you changed your mind, you were having a midlife crisis, you lost your way. We are telling you that is fundamentally wrong. It is not failure, it is penetration.
You're moving inward.
You have simply burned through that layer of karma, meaning the accumulated action and duty of that specific stage of your life. You have mastered it, exhausted its lessons, and now you have stepped one ring closer to the center of your absolute deepest truth. But moving to that next ring requires entering a void. You must be willing to enter periods of absolute terrifying unknowingness. You must be willing to let the old form die completely so the new, deeper ring of purpose can reveal itself.
And here is the brutal truth of Chapter 13. You cannot use your family as a shield against that terrifying unknowingness. We must reiterate the asymmetry between the masculine and feminine core here. If your partner has a feminine core, her highest priority, her deepest nourishment is the flow of love, the family unit, the children, the emotional connection, the home that fills her up completely. It resonates with the deepest part of her being.
But if you have a masculine core, family love is beautiful, it is vital, it is deeply cherished, but it is not your ultimate center. If your central mission in the world is stalled, if you are stuck on an outer ring of purpose that you burned through 5 years ago, all the hugs in the world from your children will not stop you from feeling an agonizing existential emptiness in your gut.
It won't cure the rotting feeling.
You cannot hide behind changing diapers, mowing the lawn, and paying the mortgage to avoid the terrifying leap into your true purpose. We see men do this all the time. They play the martyr. I can't start my business. I have a family to provide for. It's a noble-sounding excuse for cowardice. If you permanently compromise your mission for the sake of being a safe, predictable, good family man, your core rots, your presence weakens, and your woman will eventually lose all trust and sexual polarity with you because she feels that you have surrendered your spine.
Which leads us directly into the daily mechanics of how men avoid their deeper purpose. Chapter 14, don't get lost in tasks and duties. And Chapter 15, stop hoping for your woman to get easier.
Let's paint a picture that is probably going to spike the heart rate of almost everyone listening right now. It's 11:30 at night. You are staring at a blue-lit screen. You are fully locked into what we call the do mode. You are hyper-focused, aggressively grinding out an email, crunching a spreadsheet, trying to zero out your inbox. Someone, maybe your partner, maybe your kid, walks into the room just to ask you a simple question, and you violently snap at them.
You bark at them.
You bark a one-word answer.
And-
You are completely disconnected from your physical body. You are disconnected from your breath, and you are totally, entirely numb to the present moment. You have become a biological machine processing data.
The do mode is the ultimate modern trap. It is the illusion of productivity masking a profound lack of presence. You convince yourself that if you just finish this next task, if you just clear this inbox, if you just get the garage organized, you will finally reach that oasis of peace we talked about earlier. But tasks do not make you more conscious. Checking items off a to-do list does not get you 1 millimeter closer to true freedom.
They just multiply.
The tasks are literally endless. They will reproduce until the day you die. You must relentlessly, forcefully pull yourself out of the details. You have to yank your consciousness out of the microscopic mechanics of your duties and remember the macro reality. The only thing that actually exists, the only thing that actually matters is the depth of your presence right now.
And just as you secretly hope the tasks will eventually end, you secretly hope your partner's emotional turbulence will end. This is Chapter 15. You hope she will get easier. You hope that one day she will stop complaining, stop changing her mind, stop challenging you, and just be perfectly placid and agreeable.
She won't.
And more importantly, you need to radically reframe how you view her behavior. Let's reframe every complaint, every sudden mood swing, every intense challenge she throws at you. It is not a malfunction in her software. It is a deliberate, unconscious, brilliant stress test of your structural integrity. I want you to imagine your presence, your masculine core, as a massive concrete foundation of a skyscraper. She is walking around that foundation with a sledgehammer, violently poking, striking, and smashing that concrete to see if the building is going to collapse.
She wants to feel your strength. She needs to know the building is safe. Let's give a highly specific example to show how subtle and destructive this test can be. The $1 million deflation. Imagine you just spent 6 months grinding on a massive project. You just closed the deal. You just made $1 million. You walk in the front door of your house feeling like an absolute king. You're vibrating with victory. And your partner looks at you, completely ignores the victory, looks at the kitchen, and makes a highly sarcastic, cutting joke about how you forgot to take out the trash before you left.
Time freezes. What happens in your body in that exact microsecond? Do you deflate? Do your
Oh,
shoulders slump? Does that soda can crush happen in your chest? Do you immediately get defensive, raise your voice, and start yelling, "Are you kidding me? I just made $1 million and you're talking about the trash." If you do that, you just completely, spectacularly failed the test. You just proved to her, beyond a shadow of doubt, that your strength, your pride, and your entire sense of self-worth is entirely dependent on her validation. You handed over the keys to your core. You showed her that your millionaire foundation is actually made of sand, and she can topple it with a single sentence about garbage.
if, however, you remain entirely unperturbed, if you stay grounded, breathe deep into your belly, look her directly in the eye, and perhaps even smile or laugh at the sheer absurdity of her provocation, you pass. You show her the concrete is solid. And here is the ultimate inescapable truth of the test. It never ends. You cannot out-earn it. You cannot outsmart it with logic. Finding a new, easier woman won't stop it. The new woman will just test you in different ways. 10 years of couples counseling will not stop it. She tests you because she loves you. She tests you because she desperately needs to feel your truth. She knows in your deepest heart you are free. Anything less than that, she will torment. And she's quite good at it. Yet if your purpose is to be free, you wouldn't have it any other way. Have you ever found yourself just standing right in the middle of your kitchen, staring completely blankly at your partner and genuinely wondering if the two of you are operating on like completely different planetary frequencies?
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Or maybe you've been entirely baffled when a partner's mood shifts as quickly and dramatically as, say, a summer flash flood.
Yes.
And you're just leaving yourself standing there holding a spatula,
Yeah.
wondering what on earth just happened.
It's totally lost.
Exactly. Well, if you've ever felt that way, you are definitely not alone. Today, we are going on a massive, highly specific deep dive into a framework that attempts to map out the exact architecture of those disconnects.
It really does.
We're looking at a deeply detailed section, specifically chapters 16 through 28 of David Deida's book, The Way of the Superior Man.
Right.
And our mission today is to explicitly focus on his framework for dealing with polarity, energy, and what he defines as the feminine essence. We have a massive mountain of ground to cover, and we are going to just tear it down to the studs.
We absolutely are. But before we take a single step further, there is a very crucial, non-negotiable disclaimer that we need to make directly to you, the listener.
Yeah, this is important.
It is. The source material we are examining today contains traditional, highly provocative, and very polarized views on gender dynamics, masculine and feminine essences, and relationship roles.
Very polarized.
Highly. So it is absolutely essential to make it crystal clear right now that we are not endorsing these viewpoints.
Nope.
Nor are we taking sides on them. Our goal in this deep dive is simply to impartially explore, unpack, and convey the ideas exactly as they are presented in the original text.
We're just looking at the map.
Exactly. We are holding up the architecture of this argument for you to examine for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at the blueprints, how these essences are defined, and the highly specific, sometimes controversial advice given based on those definitions.
Right. We are exploring the map, not telling you to move to the territory.
Oh, toy.
So, let's establish the foundational legend of this map before we start looking at the roads.
Good idea.
The text heavily relies on the terms masculine and feminine. And if we don't define those immediately, this whole framework is going to sound like, I don't know, a confusing 1950s sitcom.
It really is.
So how does this framework actually define these terms? Because it's not strictly about biological gender, is it?
No, and that is the most important distinction to make right out of the gate. If you equate masculine strictly with biological men and feminine strictly with biological women, this entire framework falls apart.
It just becomes completely reductive.
Completely reductive. In this paradigm, masculine and feminine are internal operating systems. They are energetic poles. Think of it like a magnet having a north and south pole, or a battery having a positive and negative terminal.
Okay.
So a biological male can have a primarily feminine essence, and a biological female can have a primarily masculine essence. Many people have a fairly even mix of both, depending on the context.
Like being highly masculine at work and highly feminine at home.
Exactly. So the masculine essence in this framework is characterized by a drive toward freedom, emptiness, mission, direction, and linear logic.
It wants to break through barriers.
Right. It wants to penetrate the world. The feminine essence, on the other hand, is characterized by a drive toward love, fullness, radiance, flow, and interconnectedness.
It's the energy of life itself.
Yes. And the core argument of this text is that in intimate relationships, sexual polarity, that magnetic spark, is created by the tension between these two different poles. When you try to make everything perfectly the same, perfectly equal and neutral, the battery loses its charge.
And that leads us perfectly into the very first major concept, which feels, honestly, designed to completely reconfigure how we think about communication between those two poles.
It's a huge shift.
It is. Chapter 16 hits us with a premise that challenges almost everything we are taught about logic and honesty. It argues that the feminine reality has a fundamentally different relationship with truth and with words than the masculine reality.
Right.
The premise is that keeping one's word is a strictly masculine trait. But a person operating from a feminine essence prioritizes emotions and shifting moods over literal, static facts.
Yes, and we have to look at how the framework redefines the very concept of truth to understand this.
Okay, lay it out.
In the masculine operating system, words are a binding contract. They are data points on a spreadsheet. If you state a fact, it is meant to represent a well-considered stance or a permanent, unchanging agenda.
Right, like an architectural blueprint.
Exactly. To state something untrue or to change your statement without a logical sequence of new data is a lie.
It's a breach of contract.
But to the feminine essence, truth is not a thin, static concept. Truth is the thickness and depth of the feeling in the present moment.
The feeling is the truth.
Yes. Therefore, her words are an expression of that present moment's emotional reality. If that feeling changes 5 minutes later, the words will change.
Wow.
And according to this framework, that isn't a lie. It is a highly accurate reflection of a changed emotional state.
Okay, but hold on. Let me just play devil's advocate here for a second. Because if a partner says to me, I hate you, I'm never moving to Texas,
Right.
and I hear a finalized decision, I'm going to start canceling moving trucks.
Logically, yes.
Right. If she comes back an hour later and asks why I canceled the trucks because she does want to move to Texas, my immediate reaction is going to be, but you just said you hated me and weren't going.
Of course.
How is a person supposed to navigate that without feeling completely gaslit?
Yeah.
Like, how does this framework expect someone to just ignore the literal words being spoken?
It's an incredibly frustrating dynamic if you are trying to parse the situation using the wrong operating system.
Okay.
The text uses a very vivid analogy to explain this disconnect. It compares feminine speech to a cloud passing in the sky.
The cloud.
Yes. One moment, the cloud looks exactly like a horse. It is
Yeah.
perfectly formed, undeniable. A moment later, the wind shifts, the pressure drops, and the cloud looks like a completely unrecognizable wisp of smoke.
Okay, I see where this is going.
You wouldn't stand in a field and scream at the cloud, but you said you were a horse.
Because the cloud is just reacting to the atmosphere.
Precisely. Her words, the framework argues, are expressions of the physics of her feelings. They are responding to the high and low pressure systems of love and emotion.
That is a wild way to look at it.
It is.
Yeah.
Expecting a person deeply grounded in the feminine essence to speak like a ship's captain charting a permanent linear course is demanding that she betray her own nature.
So when she says, I'll never move to Texas.
She isn't giving you a geographical itinerary. She is saying, in this exact second, I feel so disconnected or overwhelmed that the idea of packing up my life feels impossible.
The truth is the feeling of overwhelm, not the state of Texas.
Exactly.
That is a massive paradigm shift.
Yeah.
It means you, the listener, have to completely decouple the data from the delivery system.
You do.
And the text gives a very specific actionable rule for this, specifically in Chapter 19. It says, do not believe the literal content of what she says unless love is flowing deeply. And even then, treat it as an expression of the current climate. If an emotional storm hits, the rule is blunt. Do not analyze it.
Which is the exact opposite of what the masculine essence wants to do.
Right, because the masculine brain wants to sit down with a whiteboard.
Oh, absolutely.
It wants to map out the linear cause and effect chain. Okay, you are upset. Did I forget an anniversary? Did your boss say something? Let's trace this back to the origin point so we can solve it.
Let's fix the broken gear in the machine.
Yes. But the text says you can't chart a spreadsheet to figure out why a hurricane arrived. It is simply a shift in the weather.
And this brings up a crucial psychological implication. When you try to analyze the storm, you are subtly communicating to the feminine essence that her feelings are a problem to be fixed.
Oh.
You are telling her that her natural flowing state is broken. And that leads directly into how these different essences grow and evolve, which is a stark contrast mapped out in the subsequent chapters.
Yes, let's pivot to that growth mechanism.
Yeah.
Because if we accept this premise that the feminine is like the weather, how do you actually interact with it to cultivate a positive environment?
Right.
Because if I can't analyze the storm, what can I do?
Hmm.
The framework sets up a massive dichotomy between how to foster growth in a masculine essence versus a feminine
He
essence.
does.
It claims that the masculine side grows primarily through challenge. If you challenge a masculine essence, if you say, I bet you can't lift that, or your business model is flawed, it rises to meet the obstacle.
Friction creates fire.
Exactly. But applying that same challenge to the feminine essence is disastrous.
It creates instant, deeply rooted closure. The feminine essence, according to the text, thrives exclusively on praise and support.
Praise.
Yes, praise is not just a nice bonus. It is described as literal food for feminine qualities. If you starve the feminine of praise, it physically and emotionally withers.
Wow.
If you apply challenge to the feminine, it doesn't rise to the occasion. It retreats.
The book uses a very visceral, incredibly specific example regarding exercise and physical appearance to drive this home. Let's say a man wants his partner to exercise more or be healthier.
Okay.
If he uses a challenge, something like, I hope you don't gain weight, or you really need to hit the gym, the text warns that this will not motivate her the way it would motivate a male gym buddy.
Not at all.
It will be felt as a profound, devastating rejection of who she is right now in this exact moment. It will feel like a withdrawal of love.
Because to the feminine, love is the baseline requirement for flow. If love is withdrawn, the flow stops. The ice freezes.
Exactly. So instead, the advice is to praise the tiny quality you want to grow. You have to hunt for the smallest kernel of what you desire, and you water it with praise.
Right.
The specific example given is saying something like, you're so sexy when you sweat in your leotards.
Which sounds very specific.
It is.
Yeah.
But notice what it does. You don't mention the weight. You don't mention the health metrics. You praise the radiance of the action you want to encourage.
And we have to look deeper at why that works within this specific architecture. It brings us to chapter 20. Don't suggest that a woman fix her own emotional problem.
Oh, this one is huge.
It is. This entire concept builds on the idea that analysis and problem solving are masculine tools.
Right.
They are phenomenal at the office. You have a supply chain issue, you find the broken link, you isolate it, you analyze it, you fix it.
Standard operating procedure.
But when you apply that office-style analysis to intimacy, you create a massive no-win situation.
Think about the last time you stood at the edge of the ocean.
Okay.
It's chaotic, it's deep, it's moving in a million directions at once. It's overwhelming, but incredibly beautiful. That is the analogy the text uses for the feminine essence.
It's a great image.
The masculine essence, by contrast, is like the ships, the canals, and the dams built to navigate that ocean. The masculine decides on a point A and a point B and cuts a rigid path.
So what happens when a man asks a woman to analyze her emotions and fix her mood?
It is the psychological equivalent of building concrete walls around a section of that wild ocean and turning it into a structured, chlorinated swimming pool.
Oh, that's such a striking visual.
Yes. A swimming pool is safer. It's much more predictable. You know exactly where the deep end is, but it is completely dead.
Yeah.
You've killed the wildness, the unpredictability, and the vastness that made the ocean beautiful and awe-inspiring in the first place.
Which completely destroys the polarity we talked about earlier. You've turned your dynamic, radiant partner into a functional roommate.
Yes.
Precisely. If you ask her to act like a masculine problem solver regarding her own emotions, you are forcing her to switch operating systems.
You're forcing her to be something she's not.
Exactly. If she successfully switches, she is now animating her masculine essence. The polarity is gone. You are now two positive terminals on a battery rubbing against each other, generating zero spark.
Okay, so this brings up a massive, glaring question.
I know what you're going to ask.
If I shouldn't ask her to analyze her emotional storms,
Right.
and I shouldn't try to wall them off into a neat little swimming pool with a spreadsheet,
Yeah.
what on earth am I supposed to do when the tsunami hits?
It's the million-dollar question.
Because the text is very clear that simply tolerating a partner's moods is dangerous. Just waiting out a bad mood, like sitting quietly on the couch watching TV and waiting for the weather to pass, will inevitably lead to deep-seated resentment.
It leads to resentment because tolerance is a form of distance.
Interesting. How so?
When you tolerate someone, you are emotionally detaching from them. You are saying, I will be over here until you are done being unreasonable.
You're checking out.
You're checking out. And to the feminine essence, which craves connection and the flow of love above all else, that detachment feels like abandonment. It feels like you were leaving her alone in the storm.
Man. And this is where the text's suggestions take a sharp left turn into the wonderfully unconventional.
They really do.
Because the goal isn't to talk it out. The goal is to penetrate the mood. You have to crack the shell of closure with physical presence, love, and humor. And the book actually lists incredibly physical, almost absurd actions you can take to wrestle with this emotional chaos.
They are very out there.
It suggests tickling her, taking off your clothes and dancing the Watusi, singing opera, making animal sounds, or even lifting her off the ground and pretending you're King Kong.
It sounds ridiculous on its face.
It totally does. Like, imagine this. If my partner is furious about something and I suddenly rip off my shirt and start beating my chest like King Kong,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm escalating the situation into a hostage crisis.
It definitely sounds like a terrible idea.
Right. How does this not backfire spectacularly?
Well, it requires an immense amount of grounding, and that is the secret mechanism here. The broader context for this is found in Chapter 21, which discusses staying with her intensity.
Staying with it.
Yes. If you do the King Kong impression nervously or mockingly, it will be an absolute disaster.
It'll seem condescending.
Exactly. The text argues that a mediocre man wants his partner to calm down so they can sit at a table and discuss things reasonably, again, trying to turn the ocean into a swimming pool.
Right.
But a superior man in this framework stays present, breathing deeply, and remains completely unreactive to the damage of the storm while actively engaging with the energy of the storm.
Wow. So it's about matching the energetic output without catching the emotional virus.
That's a phenomenal way to phrase it. By standing firm, making deep eye contact, and loving her through the layers of wildness and anger without retreating, shutting down, or becoming defensive, he proves his trustability.
He's becoming the anchor.
Yes. He is communicating, your storm is big, but my love and my presence are bigger. You cannot break me with your chaos.
That is intense.
It is. So when he dances the Watusi or picks her up, he is using physical, grounded masculine energy to break the rigid spell of her emotional closure. He is literally moving the energy.
He is refusing to let the connection break, even when the weather is terrible.
Precisely.
And we can see how this philosophy of providing a strong, unshakable structure extrapolates out into everyday, mundane decision-making, which is covered heavily in Chapter 22.
Oh, the restaurant example.
Yes. Think about how many times this exact scenario plays out. You are sitting in the car, and you ask your partner, where do you want to go for dinner? And you say, whatever you want to do is fine with me.
Happens every day.
In modern culture, we think we are being agreeable. We think we are being egalitarian and giving our partners space to choose. But according to this text, that is a massive failure. It is an abdication of masculine responsibility.
It is, because if you look at it through the lens of essences, by refusing to offer direction, you are forcing the woman to animate her own masculine energy to make the decision.
You're forcing her to build the canal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You are saying, I am empty of direction right now, so you need to provide the structure. Now she has to switch out of her feminine flow, boot up her masculine operating system, analyze the options, consider the logistics, and make a definitive choice.
And decision fatigue is a real, exhausting psychological phenomenon.
It absolutely is.
If she is doing that all day at her job, making high-level logistical decisions, the last thing she wants to do is project manage Friday night dinner.
Exactly. Now, the text isn't advocating for tyranny. It isn't saying you must dictate every action and drag her to a restaurant she hates.
Right. It's not about control.
No. But it advises offering a clear perspective and a firm choice. You provide the masculine clarity. You say, I am taking us to the Italian place downtown at 7 p.m.
Even if she immediately counters with, no, I feel too heavy for pasta, let's do sushi.
Even then, the dynamic has been preserved. She is making a decision based on her feminine feelings about what feels right in the moment, reacting against the structure you provided.
You provided the wall for the water to splash against.
That's exactly it. She can relax in the presence of your direction rather than feeling abandoned in an ocean of infinite choices.
That distinction is phenomenal. You provide the structure, she provides the feeling.
Yeah.
Okay, we've talked extensively about navigating these interpersonal storms, the language of the feminine, and decision-making. But Chapter 23 broadens the scope significantly.
It takes it to a cosmic level.
It really does. It introduces this fascinating concept that the attraction to the feminine is inevitable, and it goes way, way beyond just being attracted to human women.
Right.
The text states that a person heavily grounded in the masculine essence is energetically attracted to all forms of feminine energy in the universe.
This is where the framework moves from psychology into almost an energetic physics. It asks the reader to look at what actually draws their attention.
Okay, break that down.
Well, if the masculine is structure, emptiness, and direction, then the feminine is life, fullness, movement, and radiance. Therefore, a masculine man is drawn to the radiant movement of life itself.
Regardless of what form it takes.
Exactly. This includes things we would never traditionally categorize as feminine. It includes a beautiful piece of complex music. It includes the chaotic, rushing energy of a river.
Oh, I see.
It even includes the crisp, refreshing bite of a cold beer after a hard day of work. It is pure radiance.
It is the exact same dynamic as the positive and negative poles of a battery, or the north and south magnetic poles of the Earth.
Physics.
If you are deeply polarized at the North Pole, you are going to be magnetically pulled toward anything emitting South Pole energy. It's not a choice, it's physics.
And that understanding perfectly sets up the analysis in Chapter 28, which delves into the highly specific concept of energetic temperatures.
Yes.
Because not all feminine energy is the same. The text categorizes feminine energy into distinct elemental temperatures. Some women, or some forms of feminine energy, are categorized as hot.
Right, and we aren't talking about physical attractiveness here.
No.
We are talking about thermodynamic energy.
Precisely. Hot energy is fiery, tempestuous, spicy, dramatic, and quick to ignite. It is the energy of a bonfire.
It demands attention.
Demands attention and creates massive friction. Other forms of feminine energy are categorized as cool.
Cool energy.
Yes. This energy is soothing, icy, calm, relaxing, and receptive. It is the energy of a deep, still lake. And what is vital to understand here is that these aren't value judgments. One is not better than the other.
They're simply different elemental forces.
Exactly.
And here is where we can really see the real-world long-term implications of this. Because a man's energetic needs are not static.
They change constantly.
They change over time based on the friction and temperature of his own life. Let's play this out with a hypothetical scenario.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let's say a man in his 20s falls madly in love with a partner who have a wonderfully hot, fiery energy. They argue passionately, they love passionately. She keeps him on his toes. He loves the bonfire.
He thrives on it.
But cut to 10 years later, he gets promoted to a highly stressful, boiling hot executive career where he is dealing with intense pressure, conflict, and putting out literal fires all day long.
His internal temperature is now boiling. The shift in polarity is inevitable. Suddenly, coming home to that hot, fiery energy might actively irritate him. He is already boiling, and coming home to a bonfire feels like being thrown into a furnace.
Right.
Without even realizing why, he is suddenly craving cooling energy to balance his overloaded nervous system. He wants the still lake.
But wait, doesn't that just lead to the classic midlife crisis cliche, like, my partner doesn't understand me anymore, she's too difficult, I need someone calm, which leads straight to affairs or divorce?
Yes, it often does.
So if your energetic needs change, how do you not just abandon the relationship?
That is the exact trap the text explicitly warns against. The danger is misinterpreting this energetic shift as a flaw in your partner or a fatal flaw in the relationship.
It's an internal shift, not an external problem.
Exactly. The advice here is profound. Do not get a divorce or have an affair just because your external life stressors have changed your energetic appetite. You don't abandon the bonfire just because you got sunburned at work.
Okay, so how do you cool down if your partner is inherently hot?
The framework suggests balancing your life structurally outside of the intimate relationship.
You have to take responsibility for your own thermostat.
That's beautifully said. If your career is making you boil and your partner is fiery, you need to deliberately inject cool energy into your life elsewhere.
Like what?
The text gets incredibly specific. Change your diet to include cooling foods like salads and fruits instead of heavy meats and spices.
That literal.
That literal. Take long, solitary, soothing walks by a river or the ocean to let the water visually and energetically absorb your heat. Wear lighter, softer clothing. Or get a non-sexual massage from a practitioner who naturally possesses a calming, cooling energy.
Wow. You manage the energetic imbalance through environment and self-care rather than tearing up the foundation of your intimate life and blaming your partner for not shape-shifting.
Exactly. You don't demand that your partner suddenly become a placid lake when she was born a firecracker.
That ties back perfectly to Chapter 25, which asks the reader to seriously evaluate what they prioritize in their relationship and how they treat their partner on a daily basis.
Yes.
The text draws a hard line here. If you want your partner to be a passionate consort, someone who embodies that wild, radiant, magnetic feminine energy, you cannot treat them like an on-call accountant.
It's the ultimate death of polarity.
It really is.
If you spend 90% of your time together functioning as business partners, dividing up the household chores with a spreadsheet, analyzing the mortgage rates, debating the logistics of the kids' soccer schedules, the text argues you are actively neutralizing the sexual polarity.
Because functional business-like tasks require logic, linear thinking, and structure.
They belong to the masculine domain.
So when you force the relationship entirely into that functional box, you are forcing your partner to stay in their masculine essence.
You are drying up the ocean to build a really efficient parking lot.
That's exactly it. Sure, the cars are parked perfectly, but nobody wants to swim there.
No.
Prioritizing the flow of love, even amidst the chaos of daily life, is what rejuvenates that polarity.
It's a delicate system of maintaining tension. The moment you neutralize the tension by making everything perfectly equal, perfectly reasonable, perfectly analytical, and perfectly safe, you lose the spark that makes the relationship dynamic.
You lose the magnetic pull between the North and South poles.
You gain a great roommate, but you lose a lover.
Man. So let's take a deep breath and look back at the incredible dense journey we've taken through this highly specific framework today.
It's been a ride.
We started by completely redefining truth, looking at how the feminine essence treats words not as static binding legal contracts, but as emotional weather patterns. Clouds shifting in the wind to reflect the physics of feeling.
Right.
We explored how praise acts as literal, vital nourishment for feminine growth, while treating emotional storms like an office supply chain problem. Just built a dead concrete swimming pool in the middle of a beautiful ocean.
The swimming pool.
We talked about the radical physical necessity of stepping into those storms with unshakable presence.
Yeah.
Yes, including literal King Kong impressions to prove that your structure can withstand the chaos.
Still sounds crazy, but it works in the framework.
It does. And finally, we explored the fascinating thermodynamic reality of fluctuating energetic temperatures, and how we must take responsibility for balancing our own hot and cool energy to maintain harmony, rather than demanding our partners change their fundamental nature.
It is an incredibly intricate, challenging map of human behavior and energetic exchange. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building specifically on that last concept of shifting energetic temperatures.
Okay, let's hear it.
The text suggests that our need for the hot challenge of fiery energy or the cool soothing of icy energy is constantly fluctuating based on the friction of our external lives.
Right.
If that is true, what does that mean for our expectations of marriage and long-term commitment? Is the modern ultimate goal of intimacy flawed? Are we searching for a partner who is incredibly malleable, someone who can infinitely shapeshift to meet our precise daily temperature needs?
That sounds exhausting for them.
It is. Or does this framework actually point to something much more difficult, yet profoundly liberating? That we must take ultimate individual responsibility for regulating our own internal climate.
Oh, wow.
Perhaps the real hidden lesson here is that we must actively use the world around us, nature, diet, self-awareness, and our own daily practices to balance ourselves.
Because if we don't,
We unfairly demand that our intimate partner act as the sole thermostat for our soul, which is a burden no single human being was ever designed to carry.
what an incredible, profound question to leave off on. If we carry our own weather, we let them just be the landscape.
Beautifully put.
Thank you so much for joining us and exploring this intense, complex, and highly provocative source material today. We absolutely love taking these deep dives with you, dissecting the maps of how we operate, and we'll be waiting right here to explore the next one with you. Welcome, everyone, to today's deep dive. We have a piece of source material on the table today that is honestly going to challenge a lot of the conventional wisdom you might have heard about modern relationships.
Oh, it definitely will. It's a major paradigm shift.
Yeah, we are exploring David Deida's highly influential and, frankly, undeniably provocative book, The Way of the Superior Man. Now, if you spent any time in the realms of men's work, relationship psychology, or even certain corners of spiritual growth over the last couple of decades, you've probably encountered Deida's ideas.
Right, they're pretty ubiquitous in those spaces.
Exactly. But our mission today isn't to just give you some watered-down summary of the whole book. Instead, we are taking a magnifying glass to a very specific, very intense section. We're looking at chapters 29 through 38. This chunk focuses heavily on two massive themes. First, decoding what a feminine partner actually wants, and second, navigating the chaotic dark side of intimate dynamics.
And before we really get into the weeds here, we have to set the stage. Because Daida's framework relies on a concept called sexual essentialism, which is, it's pretty heavily debated today.
Very debated.
Right.
Huh.
So our goal here isn't to say he's objectively right or wrong. We aren't here to take sides or endorse this as gospel truth. Instead, we're going to put on his highly polarized glasses for the next hour and look at relationship friction entirely through his lens.
Just impartially reporting on how this specific engine works.
Exactly. So in Daida's paradigm, relationship energies are divided strictly into two distinct poles, the masculine and the feminine. According to this text, the masculine essence is fundamentally associated with consciousness, mission, purpose, and this unshakable direction. Think of it like a giant 3D topographical mountain, unmoving.
Okay, the mountain. I like that visual.
Right. And the feminine essence, on the other hand, is associated with pure energy, emotion, radiance, and the unending chaotic flow of love. It's the weather. It's the storm circling the mountain.
That's a great way to picture it.
Now, Deida makes a point to say these essences don't necessarily correspond strictly to biological sex. You know, a man can have a feminine core, a woman can have a masculine core, and same-sex couples experience these exact same polarities too. But for the sake of simplicity, the text usually refers to the masculine as he and the feminine as she, and we'll largely follow that convention today just to keep the terminology clear as we unpack his ideas.
Right, exactly. Think of us as your tour guides through this incredibly polarized landscape. And to kick things off, okay, let's unpack this. What if the biggest arguments in your relationship aren't actually about the words being said?
Oh, this is the big one.
Right. What if that massive fight about the dishes or the tone of voice you used or the fact that you were 5 minutes late is actually a subconscious test of your core presence? What if everything you think you know about making your partner happy, like compromising or making them the absolute center of your universe, is actually the exact thing destroying their attraction to you?
It is such a radical shift in perspective, and frankly, it can be incredibly jarring if you're used to traditional couples therapy that focuses on, I statements and chore charts and 50-50 compromises.
Totally.
That shift begins right away in chapter 29, where Deida lays down a foundational, absolute, non-negotiable rule for the masculine. You must choose a woman who chooses you.
Which sounds obvious, but he takes it to a different level.
He does. He argues that pursuing someone who doesn't genuinely, enthusiastically want you is a fatal flaw right from the starting gate. And the reason is fascinating. It's not just about self-respect, it's about the energetic consequence. Chasing someone who is lukewarm breeds neediness in the masculine partner. And in this framework, neediness is the ultimate, absolute anti-aphrodisiac because it destroys trust.
I want to pause on that word neediness because I think we all have a visceral reaction to it. Deida gets very specific about why neediness kills the dynamic, and it ties right back to those core priorities you mentioned earlier.
Yay.
In this paradigm, the feminine core's ultimate priority is the flow of love and connection. But the masculine core's ultimate priority is its mission, its purpose, its direction in life. So if a man abandons his mission and makes the relationship, specifically trying to win this woman over or make her happy, his absolute priority, Deida claims the woman will actually feel smothered.
Yes, she feels it like a weight.
Right.
Yeah.
She will feel that neediness like a physical weight, and counterintuitively, to create the space she needs to breathe, she will actually animate her own masculine energy to push him away.
What's fascinating here is the underlying physics of the relationship, at least as Deida describes it. It all comes down to polarity. Think of a physical magnet. For there to be a strong magnetic pole, you need a positive pole and a negative pole.
Positive and negative, right?
If you try to push two positive poles together, they repel each other. In the context of this book, sexual attraction and deep intimacy require that magnetic pole between opposites. The masculine pole has to be grounded in mission and unshakable presence. The feminine pole is grounded in the dynamic flow of love and energy.
So if the masculine abandons his pole...
Yes, if he abandons his mission to try and merge with her pole, the relationship pole, the magnet simply loses its pull. The polarity is completely neutralized, the spark dies.
So by trying to be the perfect, attentive partner who puts her above all else, constantly chasing her and trying to make her the center of his universe, he's actually destroying the very energy that attracted her to him in the first place.
Exactly.
That naturally begs the question, though. If she doesn't want to be chased, what does she want? And that leads right into a concept in Chapter 32 that I think would genuinely shock a lot of modern relationship counselors.
Yeah.
Deida claims that a woman with a feminine core doesn't actually want to be number one in a man's life.
Right. I know that sounds incredibly counterintuitive, perhaps even offensive at first glance to some people. We are basically raised on romantic comedies that tell us the ultimate declaration of love is saying, I would give up everything for you.
Right, the classic movie trope, you are my everything.
Exactly. But Deida says that is a trap. If she is the absolute center of his universe, she feels his dependence on her for his happiness. She feels this heavy burden of being his sole reason for existing. She feels his lack of a higher purpose.
Wow.
According to this framework, what she deeply desires, even if she would never verbally admit it, or even if she actively demands the opposite in the moment, is for him to be totally, uncompromisingly dedicated to his highest purpose, even if that means sacrificing their time together.
Okay, wait, hold on. Let me play devil's advocate here because I can hear the listener practically yelling at their phone right now. Isn't that just a really convenient excuse for a guy to be a workaholic? To neglect his partner, skip anniversaries, and just say, hey, sorry, babe, I'm dedicated to my highest purpose? Deida says you should love this.
That's a great question.
How does the book differentiate between holding a masculine pole and just being a selfish, neglectful partner?
That is the crucial distinction, and Deida is very careful about it. It's not about ignoring your partner or being emotionally unavailable. It's about the source of your gravity.
The source of your gravity.
Yes. Imagine a man who has to leave for a dangerous or highly consequential mission. Maybe he's a soldier being deployed, or maybe he's an entrepreneur who has to fly across the country to pitch the startup he's poured his entire life into. He's at the door, bags are packed, his partner is crying, holding on to him, saying, please don't go, I need you, stay here with me.
Which is an incredibly intense cinematic moment.
Highly intense. The text argues that if he were to drop his bags, cancel the flight, and say, you know what, you are more important than my life's work, I'll stay. A superficial part of her might be relieved in that exact second.
Sure, her immediate anxiety is soothed.
Right. But deep down, at her absolute core, she would feel deflated. She would feel a profound loss of respect because he just demonstrated that he will compromise his deepest truth, his highest calling, just to soothe her immediate emotional discomfort.
Ah, okay. I see it now. So it's about structural integrity.
Precisely.
If I can be swayed from my life's mission just because she's crying, how strong am I really?
Yeah.
If a real crisis hits our family, am I going to crumble?
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it asks us to completely redefine devotion. In this framework, his devotion to her highest purpose is exactly what makes his devotion to her trustworthy.
Because he can't be moved.
Right. The text is saying that she wants to feel that his masculine presence is unshakable. When he holds his ground, looks her in the eye with deep love, but still picks up his bags and walks out the door to do what he absolutely must do, she can actually relax. She might be mad on the surface, she might be sad, but underneath that, her feminine core relaxes into the knowledge that her partner is guided by something greater than immediate emotional convenience. He is a safe container.
I want to ground this high-level spiritual language in modern reality for a second because we live in a world of dual-income households, shared Google calendars, and striving for equal partnerships.
Very true.
If a guy's listening to this, does this mean he shouldn't be helping with the dishes or doing the school run because it distracts from his mission?
Not at all. And that's where people often misread this text. The distinction lies in the core driver of the individual, not the domestic checklist.
Break that down.
A man can absolutely wash the dishes, change diapers, and do the grocery shopping. But how is he doing it? Is he washing those dishes while subtly resenting his life, feeling like a beaten-down cog, completely disconnected from any sense of personal purpose?
The classic passive-aggressive chore execution.
Exactly. Or is he washing them from a place of fullness, having spent his day aggressively pursuing his calling, and now he is simply maintaining the sanctuary of his home with focused presence? The text suggests that the feminine partner isn't attracted to the chore itself. She is reading the energy behind the chore. She is reading whether the man doing the dishes is an empty shell or a man anchored in his truth.
That makes so much sense. It's the difference between doing something out of passive duty versus doing it from a place of grounded alignment. You can fold laundry like a king, or you can fold laundry like a hostage.
Folding laundry like a hostage. That is the perfect way to put it.
And the feminine core is going to know the difference immediately. Which brings us to a really tricky part of this dynamic. If her core priority is the flow of love and his is direction, what happens when things aren't flowing? How does she actually communicate when she feels a lack of presence or direction from him? Because according to Deida, it was almost never literal.
It is almost never literal, and this is where we enter the territory of decoding relationship friction. Deida posits a rule in Chapter 30 that is going to sound incredibly frustrating to the logically minded listener. He states, what she wants is not what she says.
Okay, that sounds like a trap.
It sounds like a massive trap. He argues that a woman with a feminine core will frequently ask a man to do things or suggest changes in plans that she actually doesn't want him to do. Or rather, if he complies, she will be deeply disappointed.
Yes, because she is testing him. And I want to be really clear here, because the word test sounds manipulative. Deida doesn't frame this as a malicious, calculated trap. It's not a conscious game she's playing to make him miserable.
No, not at all.
It's an instinctive, biological, and energetic probing. She is testing the structural integrity of the container.
Exactly. She is testing to see if his masculine presence is stronger than his distractibility. Let's make concrete. Let's say a man is deeply focused on a critical project for work. It's a Sunday, he's in the zone, it's totally aligned with his purpose. His partner comes in, wraps her arms around him and says, let's skip this, come watch a movie with me on the couch.
The ultimate temptation.
Right. If he immediately caves, drops the project he literally just said was vital, and goes to the couch just to please her, he fails the test. She explicitly asked him to do it, but when he does, she learns that his purpose is weak, he is easily swayed. And paradoxically, as they sit on the couch, she will likely become irritable, distant, or even pick a fight, even though she got exactly what she asked for.
I think every guy listening right now has experienced a version of that and felt like he was losing his mind. You do exactly what was requested, and suddenly the vibe in the room is icy, and you have absolutely no idea why.
Because you abandon your pole.
Exactly. Deida is essentially saying, you gave her the literal thing she asked for, but you deprived her of the energetic thing she actually needed, which was to feel your unshakable focus. You're supposed to say, with absolute love, I would love to, but I have to finish this. I'll be with you in an hour.
And this raises an important question about how we interpret communication across these polarities in general. Because if what she asks for isn't what she wants, what about when she's upset? Deida introduces a concept in Chapter 31 that I think is the most controversial, yet potentially the most transformative in the entire book.
I know exactly where you're going. I literally circled this entire chapter in red pen.
Her complaint is content-free.
Content-free. What does that mean in practice? Let's play test this. Let's say a couple is fighting about the garage being a mess or finances or why he didn't take out the garbage. The masculine instinct, and frankly the modern therapeutic instinct, is to argue the facts, to bring out the calendar, the receipts, the logical sequence of events.
Right. I took the garbage out on Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. Here is the spreadsheet proving my chore compliance.
Exactly. Here's the data.
And Deida says that bringing a spreadsheet to a fight with the feminine is the exact wrong move. It completely misses the point of what is actually happening. He characterizes the feminine essence as pure energy in motion. It's like the ocean or the weather. Therefore, when she is in an emotional state, her complaints are rarely about objective, literal facts. They are about the weather patterns of the relationship. Deida describes her complaints as warning bells or oracles.
Oracles, that's a powerful word.
They are bodily, emotional feedback reflecting the man's unconscious habits, his lack of presence, or his lack of true direction. She is acting as a mirror to his energetic alignment.
Okay, let's make this visceral so the listener can really see it. Trying to fix a woman's emotional complaint with logic is like trying to stop a rainstorm with a spreadsheet. It's absurd when you look at it that way.
Totally absurd.
If she is saying, you never help around here, you never take out the trash, and you logically point out the specific dates you did it, you are entirely missing the fact that she is actually communicating, I don't feel your presence. I feel a lack of love flowing between us. I feel like you're disconnected from our life. The trash is just the closest physical object she can attach that immense emotional weather to.
Exactly. And Deida's advice here is profound. He says to look past the words being spoken. He literally advises the man to look at his partner's physical body. Look at the bags under her eyes. Look at the lines of tension around her mouth. Listen to the pitch of her voice.
Reading the physical data, not the verbal data.
Yes. Those physical signs are the true indicators of how clearly he is living his purpose and how deeply he is pervading the relationship with loving presence. If she is tense, complaining, and physically exhausted, the masculine partner's job isn't to debate the garbage schedule. His job is to recognize that the energetic container he is providing is leaking.
But again, I have to play the proxy for the skeptic here.
Please do.
Wait, if he completely ignores her complaint about the garbage because he thinks it's content-free, isn't that just weaponized incompetence? Like, oh, babe, your complaint about the dishes is just an oracle of my energetic alignment, so I'm not going to load the dishwasher.
Yeah.
How does a guy apply this without just being a jerk?
It's a great pushback. And the answer is that ignoring the garbage is still failing the test. Content-free doesn't mean ignore the physical reality. It means don't argue the literal words.
Ah.
The correct response in Daida's framework isn't to ignore the garbage, nor is it to argue about the garbage. The correct response is to bring overwhelming, grounded, loving presence to the moment. You walk over, you look her in the eyes, you hug her deeply, you breathe with her until her nervous system physically settles, and then you take out the garbage with decisive action. You address the energy first and the logistics second. The massive mistake is trying to solve the energy with logistics. That makes so much sense. You have to shift the weather pattern first. And this ties directly into a major source of frustration for the masculine, which Deida addresses head-on in Chapter 33. The idea that your excellent track record is completely meaningless to her.
This is where the clash of masculine and feminine paradigms is just glaringly obvious. The masculine paradigm is linear, goal-oriented, and cumulative.
It builds over time.
Right. A man will often defend himself in an argument by pointing to his past successes. I've been a great provider for 10 years, or I took you on an amazing anniversary trip last week. Why are you so angry today?
Right, I put the coins in the meter.
Exactly. He thinks his past achievements accumulate into a permanent status of good partner. But the feminine paradigm is focused on the present flow of energy. A past track record means absolutely nothing in the face of a present lack of love or a present mistake. It's like standing in the middle of a literal blizzard, right? The wind is howling, you're freezing to death, and your partner is standing there waving a weather report from yesterday, yelling, "But it was 80 degrees and sunny yesterday. Remember the sunshine yesterday?"
That is exactly it.
It doesn't change the fact that she is actively freezing right now.
Yeah.
In the feminine reality, love is a continuous flow, not a bank account you make deposits into and then just live off the interest. If the flow stops, the relationship is starting, regardless of how much was flowing yesterday. Deida insists that the man must drop the defensiveness, drop the logical justifications of his past deeds, and restore love in the present moment.
What's fascinating here is the sheer level of accountability this places on the masculine.
Huge.
If you really absorb what Deida is saying, the man can never rest on his laurels. He can never clock out of providing presence. He has to read the emotional environment continuously, not as a series of problems to be permanently solved, but as a living, breathing ecosystem that he must navigate with a steady hand and an open heart. It demands a level of spiritual vigilance that is, frankly, exhausting if you aren't truly anchored in your own purpose.
Okay, so let's zoom out and look at the daily reality of this.
Yeah.
If you aren't supposed to argue the facts, and you can't rely on your past good deeds, and you have to constantly provide this unshakable presence, what does that actually look like in the grand scheme of the relationship? Well, in Chapter 34, Deida says it all comes down to demonstrating direction. The feminine core deeply wants to relax in the demonstration of a man's direction.
Yes. And he breaks this down across multiple domains: financial, sexual, emotional, and spiritual direction. The key concept here is that he doesn't necessarily have to do all the physical work, but he must steer the course.
You have to hold the blueprint.
Right. If he does this, she is able to relax her own masculine edge. Now let's define that. In the modern world, women are frequently required to operate in their masculine energy all day long.
Managing teams, hitting targets, organizing complex logistics.
Exactly. When she comes home, if she has a feminine core, she wants to take that armor off. She wants to surrender that hypervigilance. But she can only do that if she intuitively trusts that her partner is holding the wheel.
And the absolute enemy of that relaxation is ambiguity. Deida claims that if a man has the slightest uncertainty about his future, whether he's unsure about his career path, his financial stability, or even his spiritual convictions, his partner will physically feel it. She won't just hear him say it, she will feel it in the tension of his body, the hesitation in his voice, the way he walks into a room.
And when she feels that ambiguity, what happens? If we connect this to the bigger picture of relationship dynamics, this is where massive modern friction occurs. When a man is ambiguous or lacking clear direction, the woman's nervous system detects a lack of safety.
Because the container is weak.
Yes. To compensate, she will intuitively step into the masculine role to ensure survival and stability. She will take over the finances. She will plan all the vacations. She will manage the entire social calendar. But according to this framework, doing so diminishes her feminine radiance.
Because she's putting the armor back on.
Precisely. She may become highly efficient, incredibly successful, and keep the household running perfectly, but she will also become tense, angular, exhausted, and ultimately resentful that she has to be the one steering the ship.
I think this raises a really critical question for anyone listening right now. Is the burden of direction entirely on the masculine? In a 21st century context, that sounds incredibly heavy. It sounds a bit outdated if you view it purely through the lens of earning potential or traditional gender roles.
It does.
But Deida makes a really nuanced distinction here that we have to highlight. He explicitly states that it does not matter if the woman earns all the money. Let me repeat that because it's vital. She can be the sole breadwinner, making millions, and he can be a stay-at-home dad or a struggling artist.
Right.
What matters is the energetic direction. What matters is that she feels his loving clarity and his absolute certainty of direction for their life together.
It's not about providing the physical resources, it's about providing the structural container. He is responsible for the vision, even if she is the one funding it. He must know where they are going, emotionally and spiritually. He has to be the captain of the ship's morale and destination, even if she owns the boat.
I love that. Captain of the destination, even if she owns the boat.
If he provides that unshakable container, she can, as Deida puts it, get on his train and trust the journey. She can express her full, chaotic, beautiful feminine energy, her creativity, her sensuality, her joy, without the underlying terror that the train is going to derail.
Think about how this framework might alleviate or exacerbate stress for you, depending on your natural essence. If you have a masculine core, the demand to constantly provide direction and hold the container might initially feel like a heavy burden. But Deida argues it's actually your highest calling, and avoiding that responsibility is what truly causes you existential pain. If you have a feminine core, having to constantly manage the logistics of your relationship, always having to be the one to ask, what are we doing this weekend or what's our 5-year plan, probably feels bone-achingly exhausting. The idea of being able to surrender that control to a partner you fully bodily trust must sound incredibly liberating.
It is a profoundly polarized view of intimacy. What Deida is suggesting is that equality of value does not mean sameness of role. In our modern quest for equality, we often try to neutralize relationships into a perfectly balanced 50-50 roommate situation where everything is split exactly down the middle.
Right, spreadsheet equality.
Yes. But Deida argues that by neutralizing the roles, you neutralize the passion. By leaning completely into these different core drivers, the masculine providing the unyielding structure and consciousness, the feminine providing the vital flowing energy of love and light, the couple achieves a level of dynamic, magnetic harmony that a purely homogenized relationship simply cannot reach.
But holding that direction, being that unshakable mountain we talked about, isn't always a calm, peaceful experience. In fact, if your partner has a strong feminine essence, sometimes her energy is going to be incredibly chaotic, dark, and intense.
No, absolutely.
It's not always going to be sunshine, light, and gentle breezes. Sometimes it's a Category 5 hurricane. So how does the text say a man should handle the storm? That is the focus of the final section we're analyzing today, chapters 37 and 38, and honestly, it's the most challenging and poetic part of the entire book.
It really is. In chapter 37, Deida introduces a phrase that is quite startling, and we need to unpack it carefully. He says, she wants the killer in you.
Okay, let's clear that up immediately, because that sounds like a massive red flag.
It sounds terrible out of context, but Deida is very quick to clarify that this does absolutely not mean violence, aggression, abuse, or dominance. Not at all. It is a metaphorical spiritual killer.
Right. So what does that actually mean? Let's ground this. If it's not about being a tough guy in a bar fight, what is the killer? Deida defines it as the capacity to yield fearlessly into love. It's the understanding that life is a process of dying through to what cannot be lost.
It's an absolute spiritual fearlessness.
Yes. A man who has the killer in him is not afraid of the intensity of the present moment.
Yeah.
He doesn't flinch when things get dark, overwhelming, or terrifying.
Think about what it takes to make a massive, life-altering career leap, despite the overwhelming fear of failure. Or what it takes to sit in an ICU waiting room with a sick child and not completely disintegrate, but instead hold the space for your family.
Right.
That requires the killer. The part of the psyche that can face the void, face ego death, face intense pressure, and remain entirely conscious. And what's fascinating here is how this ties into chapter 38, which states that she needs his consciousness to match her energy.
Deida uses very strong, ancient archetypal language here. He says the feminine destructress must be met by the masculine destroyer. When a woman is deep in her dark feminine energy, when she is furiously angry, deeply grieving, utterly chaotic, or testing him with an intense emotional storm, a man cannot cringe.
He cannot back down.
No, he cannot withdraw into his shell, he cannot use a restrained, timid therapist voice to try and calm her down, and he certainly cannot hide behind logic and spreadsheets.
Deida is drawing heavily on Eastern spiritual traditions here, specifically the metaphor of Shiva and Shakti, which is crucial to understanding this dynamic. Shakti is the feminine principle. It is pure, raw, creative, and destructive energy. It brings life and it destroys life. Shiva is the masculine principle, pure, unmoving, formless consciousness. The text views a woman's dark moods not as a curse, not as a psychological problem to be fixed or medicated away, but as a profound spiritual gift. It is the ultimate test of a man's consciousness. If he falters with her, if he loses his center, gets defensive, or runs away in the face of her emotional storm, he will ultimately falter in the world.
Let's paint the picture from the text, because it's incredibly cinematic. Imagine a scenario where she is furious. Maybe it's a fight about finances or family or feeling unloved. She is screaming, maybe she's throwing a plate. The energy in the room is just explosive.
Total storm.
A lot of modern men in that situation would do one of three things. They would shrink away and apologize profusely just to make it stop. They would coldly leave the house to let her calm down. Or they would get triggered and yell back defensively. Deida says all three are failures.
Complete failures of presence.
Yes. A superior man must meet her energy with his body and his consciousness. He shouldn't shrink. He should walk right up to her, look her dead in the eyes, perhaps hold her firmly but lovingly, maybe even laugh affectionately at the cosmic, intense humor of the moment, and completely pervade her chaos with his unshakable presence.
And that part about laughing affectionately often trips people up. It's not mocking her. It's not condescending.
Right, it's not a smirk.
Exactly. It's the laugh of a mountain, realizing it cannot be moved by the wind. It's a deep, grounded joy in the face of intensity. He doesn't try to shut down her dark energy. He matches its sheer volume with the volume of his loving presence. He becomes the immovable object that her unstoppable force can safely crash against.
I love that. The immovable object.
And the magic of this, according to Deida, is that when she feels that he truly cannot be moved, that he is not secretly terrified of her darkness, her nervous system finally registers ultimate safety. She can let go of the rage and surrender back into the light of love.
It's the ultimate training ground. Your capacity to stand firm in intimacy directly mirrors your capacity to succeed in life. The world is going to test you financially, physically, and spiritually, just exactly as your partner tests you emotionally.
Yes.
If you can't handle your partner's anger without losing your center, how in the world are you going to handle a massive failure in your business? How are you going to handle the inevitable tragedies of life? If you shrink from her, you will shrink from the world.
It is an incredibly intense, almost mythic view of relationship dynamics. It's not about having pleasant, polite conversations over oat milk lattes where everyone uses perfect, nonviolent communication.
Right.
It's about the clash and union of elemental forces. It demands that both partners bring their absolute, unfiltered essence to the table and trust the friction to forge something stronger.
If we synthesize this entire journey we've been on today, we've explored a deeply, unapologetically polarized framework. In Deida's paradigm, the masculine is tasked with cultivating an unshakable direction, an unwavering purpose, and a fearless consciousness that can withstand literally any storm.
And the feminine provides the vital, sometimes chaotic, always testing, life-giving energy of love.
Exactly. The text challenges almost all conventional modern relationship advice by suggesting that true spiritual and sexual harmony comes from maximizing these differences, not neutralizing them into a safe, boring middle ground. It's about letting the masculine be fully terrifyingly masculine and the feminine be fully overwhelmingly feminine, and letting those two absolute extremes meet in devotion.
And whether you agree with that framework entirely or find parts of it archaic or challenging, it absolutely forces you to look at your own dynamics through a completely different lens. It asks you to stop looking at your partner's behavior as a list of annoying habits to be managed and start looking at the underlying energetic currents that are driving those behaviors.
Which changes everything. So I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day. If we accept the premise that we each have a core essence, that we are either fundamentally driven by a mission toward freedom or fundamentally driven by the desire for the total flow of love, how much of the friction in your own relationships is actually just a massive misinterpretation? What if the things that drive you absolutely crazy about your partner, their stubborn, detached obsession with a work project, or their unpredictable, overwhelming emotional storms, aren't actually character flaws that need to be fixed in therapy? What if they were simply the raw, unfiltered expression of the exact opposite energy that attracted you to them in the very first place?
That raises a brilliant, provocative question. What happens if you stop trying to change your partner to be more like you and instead learn to master your own response to their core essence? What if the friction isn't a problem to be solved, but the exact spark needed to keep the fire alive?
Something to think about next time you find yourself wanting to bring a spreadsheet to a rainstorm. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We've covered some intense, heavy ground today, and we hope it gave you some fascinating new perspectives to chew on, or at least a new way to look at the dishwasher. Until next time.
Welcome everyone to today's deep dive. We are so glad you decided to pull up a chair and join us.
Absolutely.
Because today we are bringing you along as the third person in this conversational journey, and let me tell you, it is going to be an incredibly fascinating and frankly a wildly provocative ride.
Oh, buckle up. Seriously.
We are unpacking excerpts from the 20th anniversary edition of the book The Way of the Superior Man by David Deida. And our mission for this deep dive is to explore the text's highly specific, totally uncompromising framework on gender, sexual polarity, and spiritual growth.
Right.
The goal here is to examine how the source material claims we can master the challenges of intimacy, work, and desire by actively embracing rather than neutralizing what it calls our core masculine and feminine energies.
And it is a remarkably dense framework. I mean, it demands that we look at human interaction not through a lens of, modern social etiquette, but through a lens of raw kinetic energy.
Yeah.
We are going to be breaking down the literal mechanics of how this text views attraction, communication, and purpose.
Now, a quick heads up before we get into the weeds here. The source material features very definitive, essentialist perspectives on gender, sexuality, and human biology.
Very definitive.
Yeah, and some of these concepts might sound completely counter to how we are currently taught to view equality in relationships in modern society. Our purpose today is not to tell you whether this framework is objectively right or wrong. We aren't endorsing these viewpoints, nor are we taking sides against them. We are simply acting as your impartial guides, mapping out the territory of the author's argument so you can understand the architecture of these ideas exactly as they are contained in the original source material.
Think of us as exploring a completely different operating system for human relationships. Our job is to show you the code, explain how it runs, and, well, let you decide what to do with that information.
Okay, let's unpack this. We'll start with the text's foundational premise regarding how modern relationships have evolved over time. The source material outlines a very specific historical progression to explain why so many modern couples feel like they are stuck in a rut. It argues that society originally existed in a stage characterized by fixed, rigidly separated roles. If you want a cinematic mental image, think of the extreme 1950s caricatures. You have the macho jerk husband who expects dinner on the table, and the submissive ex-wife who isn't allowed to have her own bank account.
And in that initial stage, the dynamic was built on a deeply unhealthy dependency. Men typically sought to control the relationship through physical or financial dominance. They held the purse strings and the societal power.
Exactly.
And women, denied direct agency, often had to resort to manipulating the emotional environment of the home just to get their needs met.
It was a state of polarity, yes, but it was an abusive, unconscious polarity. It was based on survival and restriction rather than actual love.
And the text is actually very quick to point out that moving away from that toxic dynamic was a massive, absolutely necessary improvement for humanity. The book describes a second stage of evolution, which it calls the 50-50 stage. This is essentially where a lot of modern society sits right now.
This is the stage where men and women sought to balance their inner energies to achieve total equality and independence.
You can visualize this 50-50 stage as a great leveling of the playing field. To achieve this, men had to embrace their inner feminine energy. They became more emotionally expressive, they learned to go with the flow, they started sharing household duties.
They learned to be vulnerable.
Exactly. And simultaneously, women had to embrace their inner masculine energy. They gained massive financial independence, focused on their careers, learned to be aggressive in the boardroom, and became highly assertive. So in terms of social, economic, and political roles, the differences between men and women were smoothed out. We became wonderfully similar.
Which, again, the text emphasizes was a triumph for social equality.
Yeah.
Nobody is arguing that we should go back to the days of financial dependence. But here is the massive catch, according to the source material. This 50-50 stage is viewed not as a utopian endpoint, but as the temporary intermediate stage. While it led to bank accounts balancing out and chores being split perfectly down the middle, the text argues that it also created a phenomenon called sexual neutrality.
And the author suggests that in our noble quest to make everything perfectly equal and safe, we accidentally filed down the edges of what actually creates passion. We became highly independent, incredibly polite partners,
We became fantastic co-managers of a household.
fantastic co-managers. But the intimacy suffered. The raw, spark-flying passion began fizzling out, leaving a lot of couples looking at each other wondering why they feel more like roommates than lovers.
I want to dig into the physics of that because the book relies heavily on a specific scientific metaphor here. The text introduces the concept of sexual polarity. Can you break down how the author uses the mechanics of magnetism to explain this loss of passion?
Oh, absolutely. If you think about basic physics, sexual passion in this framework operates exactly like a magnetic or electrical current. For a spark to arc across a gap, for magnetism to have any pull whatsoever, it absolutely requires two distinct opposing poles,
You need a positive and a negative.
or a north and a south. If you take two magnets and you somehow neutralize their charge so they are exactly the same, they won't repel, but they won't attract either. They just sit there, inert, dead weight.
In the context of human relationships, the author defines these two necessary poles as the masculine and the feminine.
So the argument is that if partners strive for total, politically correct sameness, like a 50-50 neutrality where nobody wants to step on toes, even in moments of intimate physical connection, the magnetic charge vanishes.
That is the core warning of the text opening chapters. You end up with a very safe, very civilized, loving friendship. You might have two best buddies who occasionally rub genitals in bed because it's a Friday night, but the juice, that chaotic, raw, terrifying, and ecstatic passion of the relationship completely dries up. You've neutralized the battery. Wow. You've neutralized the battery. So you can have a loving friendship based on sameness, but ongoing sexual passion requires a stark difference, an energetic friction. To get that friction back, the text says you need someone willing to fully inhabit the masculine pole and someone willing to fully inhabit the feminine pole. And it is crucial to point out to you, the listener, that the text applies this rule regardless of gender or sexual orientation. It explicitly states that this law of polarity applies to homosexual and heterosexual relationships alike. It does not matter who plays which pole or what biology they were born with, just that the opposing poles vividly exist.
Which brings us to the architecture of what these poles actually are. How does the source material define these two core essences? Let's look at the masculine essence first. In this framework, the masculine is not defined by having a beard or fixing cars.
Right, it's not lumberjack stereotypes.
Yes. No, not at all. It is fundamentally an energy driven by a relentless search for freedom, mission, and direction. It is an energy characterized by a desire to break through constraints, to cut through the noise and reach a state of empty, peaceful release.
And the text uses a really relatable example to make this concrete. It asks why people with strong masculine essences often obsess over watching things like football or boxing or mixed martial arts. On the surface, it just looks like a cultural stereotype. But how does the book justify that appeal from an energetic standpoint?
It translates the literal sport into an energetic metaphor. A football game is basically a cinematic representation of overcoming obstacles. It is about a force breaking free from an opponent's tackle, succeeding in a hyper-focused mission by getting the ball into the end zone and achieving a momentary state of absolute freedom and victory.
So it's the joy of the breakthrough.
Exactly. For the masculine essence, facing danger, putting everything on the line, and achieving freedom from constraint is a literal form of ecstasy.
Now contrast that with the feminine essence. The text defines the feminine not by wearing dresses or being quiet, but as an energy driven by a search for love, fullness, and energetic flow. The feminine essence abhors emptiness,
Right.
where the masculine seeks the peace of an empty, silent, unconstrained state, like the bliss of sitting in an empty room after a hard day's work with zero demands. The feminine seeks to be utterly filled up.
The author points to the popularity of soap operas, romantic dramas, or even just hours-long conversations with friends about the nuanced dynamics of relationships. To the masculine eye, a soap opera is just chaotic drama with no clear goal.
Right, just endless talking.
But to the feminine essence, it is an expression of the flow of life. The feminine desires the bliss of real love, the chaotic, oceanic, unpredictable flow of human connection. It wants the storms, the deep waters, the fullness of feeling.
So you have the masculine energy constantly seeking release and freedom, trying to empty the vessel, and you have the feminine energy constantly seeking surrender and fullness, trying to fill the vessel to the brim.
What's fascinating here is how the text attempts to quantify this across the population. The author claims that about 90% of all human beings have a distinctly masculine or distinctly feminine sexual essence at their core. Only about 10% of people are born with a truly balanced, entirely neutral essence.
So for that rare 10%, sexual polarity just isn't that important.
For that 10%, a 50-50 relationship is paradise. They're perfectly happy with a highly civilized, perfectly equitable friendship full of human sharing, without the wild, passionate ups and downs. They don't need the magnetic friction. But the text is written explicitly for the other 90% of us.
And it argues that if you are in that 90% and you actively suppress your core essence to act balanced or 50-50 because that is what modern society or corporate culture expects of you, you will eventually suffer.
The source material claims this suppression leads to literal physiological stress, emotional cramping, and a chronic loss of vitality. Let's use an anthropocentric translation to picture this. Imagine a woman with a deeply feminine core essence who spends 60 hours a week in a cutthroat corporate law firm.
Okay, I can picture that.
To survive, she has to run massive amounts of masculine energy. She has to be linear, aggressive, unfeeling, and hyper-focused on breaking through constraints. The book argues that while she might be wildly successful financially, energetically she will begin to dry up. She will feel a tight, hard shell forming around her heart.
And on the flip side, imagine a man with a deeply masculine core essence who is trying to fit into a highly cooperative, consensus-based, flow-oriented lifestyle because he wants to be perceived as a nice guy.
Yeah, exactly.
The text claims he will inevitably disconnect from his edge, his life purpose, and will walk around feeling hollow, directionless, and secretly resentful.
The book is essentially arguing that for the sake of societal fairness, we have inadvertently demanded that people squash their true sexual essences. This has led to a culture of people who are spiritually thwarted, energetically exhausted, and afraid to be fully themselves in the bedroom. The framework demands that to experience deep, bone-shaking fulfillment, you must shed this polite pretense and live ruthlessly true to your core essence.
Okay, so if 90% of us are walking around suppressing our core code, how does the book say we reboot the system? Let's dive into what living true to that masculine core actually looks like first. We're moving into the section outlining the way of the masculine, purpose, and presence. And the first major psychological trap the text identifies is what it calls the myth of completion.
Oh, this is a devastatingly common psychological pitfall for the masculine essence. It is the error of thinking that one day, if you just grind hard enough, it will all be done.
The finish line.
Right, the finish line. It is the internal monologue that says, if I just push through this awful project at work, I can finally rest. Or once my partner finally understands my point of view, we will never argue again and I can relax. Or I'm only doing this soul-crushing job so that someday, 10 years from now, I can finally do what I really want.
The illusion of someday. I think anyone listening can relate to that feeling of waiting for the treadmill to stop. But the text is brutally blunt here. It shatters that illusion completely. It says it never ends. The challenges will never cease. As long as you are drawing breath, there will be tasks, there will be friction, the house will need repairs, the relationship will require work, and unresolved issues will pop up.
Therefore, the author argues, waiting for the good stuff to happen in the future is a tragic waste of a life. The strict instruction here is to stop postponing your deepest gift. The book demands that a masculine person spend at least 1 hour a day, every single day, giving their deepest gift, doing what they feel they were truly put on this earth to do, regardless of their daily duties, their lack of funds, or their exhaustion.
I'm trying to picture the pushback the author must get on that. People have kids, they have mortgages, they have exhausting commutes. 1 hour a day doesn't sound like a lot, but when you are completely depleted, it feels impossible. How does the text address those very real-world excuses?
There is a profound, almost aggressive psychological observation tied to this. The text suggests that for the masculine essence, most postponements are actually sophisticated excuses to cover up a lack of creative discipline and a deep-seated fear of failure.
Oh, wow. So the exhaustion is a shield.
Exactly. Men often blame their limited bank accounts or their heavy family obligations for not writing that book, starting that business, or pursuing their true purpose. But the text argues these are convenient, socially acceptable shields used to avoid the sheer terror of facing their own limits.
Because if you never try, you never fail.
Right. If you say you don't have time, you never have to find out if you were actually good enough. By forcing yourself to spend 1 hour a day on your core purpose, you call your own bluff. You discover if your fantasy of your brilliant future life is real, or if it is just a comforting lie you tell yourself to avoid doing the hard, terrifying work of creation today.
That requires an excruciating amount of vulnerability. You have to strip away all your comforting narratives, which actually transitions perfectly into the next major concept for the masculine living at the edge and embracing pain. The text uses this phrase, "A superior man must know your real edge and don't fake it."
If we connect this to the bigger picture of authenticity, it is about radical self-honesty. It is about not pretending to be more enlightened, more capable, or more fearless than you actually are. Every single man has a limit. He has a precise edge where his courage runs out and his fear begins. The honorable path, according to the text, is to openly admit those fears and resistances.
So there is no shame in being afraid, but there is shame in hiding it.
And there is equal dishonor in stopping short of your edge out of sheer laziness. You cannot camp out in your comfort zone. You have to locate your exact current edge of competence and fear, and you have to lean just 1 millimeter beyond it every single day.
And when you do that, when you push past your edge, you are inevitably going to fail at some point. You are going to get hurt or rejected or criticized. The text has very specific, almost mechanical instructions for what to do in that moment of pain. Let's paint a picture. Imagine a man fails at a major life project, or his partner looks at him and delivers a searing, accurate criticism of his character.
Ouch.
Yeah. The automatic biological instinct, what the book would call the unskillful reaction, is to contract. You withdraw. Your chest physically tightens. Your shoulders roll forward. You find it incredibly hard to look the person in the eye. You close up like a turtle pulling into its shell.
Because a closed body is trapped in a state of self-protective tension. It is a biological defense mechanism. But the text views this physical contraction as a catastrophic loss of freedom. It means you are no longer present. You are trapped in your own reactive fear. The practice it prescribes to counter this is visceral and physiological. In the exact moment you feel that emotional pain and the urge to shrink, you must actively open the front of your body.
Literally physical. You have to force your posture to change.
Yes. You must breathe deeply into the belly, actively soften the muscles of the chest, and force yourself to look directly into the eyes of whomever you are with, or simply look clearly at the reality of your failure. You have to feel your own searing pain and remain completely present with the other person simultaneously.
That sounds intense.
It is. The argument is that only an open, physically relaxed body can sense the subtle cues of a situation and allow a person's highest intelligence to manifest spontaneously. You have to live with an open heart, even when it is actively being broken.
It's like being a samurai of relationships. You stand in the center of the battlefield, totally exposed but totally present. But here is where the text makes one of its most challenging, and I imagine for many listeners, highly controversial assertions. It claims that for a person with a masculine essence, their life's purpose must come before their intimate relationship.
This is a direct, unapologetic challenge to the modern romantic ideal. We are raised on movies and songs that tell us your partner should be your everything, that love conquers all, and that a good man puts his relationship above all else.
Right, the happy wife, happy life mentality.
Exactly. But the source material violently disagrees. It argues that if a man prioritizes his intimate relationship over his highest, deepest purpose in life, he actually weakens his masculine core. He becomes inherently less authentic.
Let's play this out. What happens if he does make his partner his absolute priority? Let's say he turns down a demanding dream job because it would mean less time at home, and his partner asked him to stay. On paper, society calls him a great guy. What does the book say happens next?
The text claims his partner, assuming she has a feminine essence, will subconsciously feel this weakness. Even if she's the one who tearfully demanded more of his time, even if she begged him to stay, if he permanently compromises his soul's mission to appease her, she will eventually lose trust in his inner direction.
There is this incredibly dramatic scene the text uses to illustrate this dynamic. I want to read the vibe of it for the listener because it perfectly encapsulates the author's point. A man is called to go off to war. It is his absolute duty and his highest purpose in that moment to defend his community. He hugs his crying partner goodbye. She is terrified. She begs him not to go. She says, "Please stay with me." He looks at her, feeling her pain completely, and says, "You know that I must go." She looks back, recognizing his unwavering resolve, and says, I know and I love you, and he leaves.
That scene is meant to capture an essential energetic principle. The feminine essence wants the masculine be absolutely, immovably dedicated to his truth. If that man had stayed home simply because she cried, she might have been temporarily relieved that he was safe. But at a much deeper, energetic level, she would feel that he lacked the strength to do what was right. He abandoned his truth because he couldn't handle her emotional storm.
He failed the test of his own edge.
Precisely. He would lose his masculine edge, and over time, she would inevitably lose her sexual attraction to him. The text insists that a man's historical track record of being a nice, accommodating guy does not matter if, in the present moment, he lacks the spine to pursue his deepest truth. The feminine wants a man who is unbendable in his purpose, because only an unbendable man can be trusted to navigate the chaos of life.
Okay, so that gives us a really stark view of the masculine side of the equation, this unbending, forward-moving force. Let's pivot and look at how the text describes the other half of the battery navigating the feminine. And the central metaphor here is so vivid it borders on the cinematic. The text compares the feminine essence to the ocean and the masculine essence to a ship.
It is a brilliant structural analogy that clarifies the friction between the two. Think of the masculine ship. A ship is built with a specific architecture. It has a captain who chooses a single destination, and it navigates a linear, logical path from point A to point B. It is entirely about goals, efficiency, and direction.
And then you have the ocean.
The ocean is pure, uncontained, immense energy. It does not have a destination. It moves in all directions simultaneously. It has incredibly deep, unseen currents. It can whip up violent, terrifying storms out of nowhere, and it can settle into serene, breathtaking calms. It is life force itself, completely unconcerned with point A or point B.
And the cardinal rule the text gives to the masculine partner who is trying to relate to this ocean is don't analyze your woman. Because if you try to force the ocean to behave like a ship, you are going to drive yourself insane and you are going to destroy her spirit. The text says that when a man tries to logically, rationally analyze his feminine partner's moods in order to fix them, it is like a ship captain trying to build a perfectly square swimming pool in the middle of a raging sea.
It's an attempt to control the uncontrollable. Building that swimming pool might feel safer and more predictable to the masculine mind. It wants boundaries, it wants logic, but it completely destroys the wildness, the vitality, and the breathtaking power of the feminine energy.
This raises a massive point about how these two opposing forces communicate. And I think this is going to resonate with a lot of listeners. The text argues that feminine complaints are very often content-free.
Content-free, yeah.
I have to say, the first time I read that phrase, content-free complaint, it sounded incredibly dismissive. But when the author breaks it down, it's actually a profound observation about translation. What does it actually mean?
It means that the literal words coming out of the feminine partner's mouth during a moment of distress are not the actual issue. The dictionary definition of the words is irrelevant.
It's not about what she's actually saying.
Exactly. The text gives a fantastic, highly illustrative example. A man comes home after working exhausting hours for 6 months. He just closed a massive deal and successfully made $1 million for his family. He walks through the door expecting a ticker tape parade and a celebration. Instead, his partner looks at him and says, "That's nice, but you've been gone for months. Did you even remember to buy milk on the way home?"
I love this example because it is the ultimate sitcom trope. You can perfectly imagine the guy's reaction. He is standing there dumbfounded, thinking, I just secured our entire financial future, I conquered the world, and you are interrogating me about 2% dairy. Are you insane? To the masculine mind, which operates on logic, ledgers, and track records, this makes zero sense.
And if he responds from that masculine, logical place, he will say, "Look at the bank account. Look at what I've done for us." But the text explains that he is completely misreading the situation. Her complaint is not a logical argument about grocery inventory. It is an energetic weather pattern. The milk is just the passing cloud she pointed at.
So what is the actual storm about?
It is a reflection of her feeling disconnected from his presence in the current moment. Her underlying unspoken desire is to feel his deep, unperturbable, loving presence right now. The text often refers to this ideal masculine presence as the divine masculine or Shiva energy.
Let's define that term for the listener because Shiva energy can sound very esoteric. How should we visualize that?
Think of Shiva in this context not just as a Hindu deity, but as an archetype of pure, unmoving, loving consciousness. Imagine a massive, unshakable mountain. The feminine storm crashes against the mountain, the winds howl, the lightning strikes, but the mountain does not shrink, it does not get defensive, and it does not run away. It just stands there, holding the space. When the feminine partner complains about the milk, she's essentially generating a storm to test his capacity to be that mountain. She is testing if he can remain loving and fully present in the face of her emotional chaos.
So if he gets defensive, if he starts waving his bank statements around and arguing logically about his track record of success, he fails the test. He shrunk from the storm.
Yes, because to the feminine essence, a man's historical track record means absolutely nothing in the face of present disconnection. The text explicitly says a man could be a perfect providing partner for 10 straight years, but if he acts aloof, defensive, or weak for 30 seconds, the feminine responds entirely to that immediate 30-second moment of energy. Her reality is the present flow of the relationship, not a historical ledger of good deeds.
I can hear the masculine listeners pulling their hair out right now. It sounds like an unwinnable game. If logic doesn't work, and a 10-year track record doesn't buy you any grace, how on earth is the masculine supposed to respond to the storm?
By understanding the fundamental nutritional needs of the feminine. The text argues that the feminine essence grows through praise and is actively destroyed by criticism. The author is adamant you cannot criticize a feminine partner into better behavior, ever.
Right. Praise is described as literal food for feminine qualities, but the book offers a very specific trick here. It's not about fake flattery. It's about praising the tiny, microscopic seed of the exact quality you want to see grow, even if it is currently buried under a mountain of bad moods.
Consider how that plays out in a sensitive situation like health. Let's say a man wants his partner to exercise more because she has been lethargic. If he uses the masculine approach, logic, and criticism, he might say, you need to go to the gym, you're getting out of shape, it's bad for your health. To the feminine essence, this feels like a devastating insult. It is a complete rejection of her current state of being. She will contract, feel unloved, and likely rebel.
So how does he use praise as food instead?
The text advises him to wait until she is simply walking across the room, perhaps stretching or moving in her pajamas. In that moment, he should look at her with genuine desire and tell her how incredibly sexy and radiant she is when she moves her body. By praising the energy of her movement, he feeds the deep feminine desire to be radiant, attractive, and full of life. This naturally encourages her to want to move more, to dance, to exercise, because she wants to feel that radiance amplify. He gets the result he wanted without ever invoking the paralyzing, destructive energy of criticism.
It is about magnifying the energy you want, rather than trying to rationally dissect and destroy the energy you don't want.
And the text advises that when the storm does hit, when the mood is dark or chaotic, instead of tolerating it with gritted teeth or trying to logically discuss it away, the masculine should actively participate in it. You don't try to talk the ocean into calming down, you dive into the waves. You penetrate her emotional closure with humor, with strong physical touch, and with fearless presence. You hold your ground until the storm passes and the sunshine returns.
Here's where it gets really interesting as we move into part 5 of the text, the dark side. This is where the book sheds all polite societal norms and deals with the intense, sometimes frightening primal undercurrents of sexual desire.
This section connects directly back to those core motivations we discussed at the very beginning. Remember, the masculine desire is for absolute freedom. When you push that desire to its absolute extreme, past the point of just wanting a quiet afternoon, it becomes a desire for ego death. It is a craving for the complete obliteration of the self, emerging with the infinite nothingness.
And the feminine desire for fullness, when pushed to its extreme, becomes a craving for absolute surrender, to be so completely taken and filled by a force greater than herself that she loses all boundaries.
And the text argues that if you disown these dark desires because they seem too intense or impolite, you kink the hose of your spiritual and bodily force, you neuter yourself. The book talks specifically about the concept of ravishment.
Let's tread carefully here, because that word carries a lot of heavy baggage. How does the text define ravishment in a way that is healthy and not just abusive?
The text defines ravishment as the act of yielding completely to physical love without holding a single ounce of yourself back. It is a savagely loving act. It is the moment where the masculine essence fearlessly takes the feminine, claiming her fully, and the feminine essence safely and utterly surrenders control. The source material argues that our modern, hyper-civilized culture suppresses this primal exchange out of a desire to be safe, equitable, and polite.
But the energy doesn't just disappear just because we decide to be polite, right?
Exactly. When the dark, aggressive, but deeply, fiercely loving desire to ravish or be ravished is suppressed in the bedroom, it leaks out into the culture in highly toxic shadow expressions. The text suggests this energetic suppression is exactly why our society has such a massive obsession with violent, degrading pornography, or, on the flip side, emotionally abusive, manipulative reality TV and soap operas. We are starving for the intensity of the dark side, but because we won't act it out consciously with love, we consume it unconsciously in toxic media.
It's essentially saying that if you don't express the monster consciously and lovingly in the bedroom, it becomes a literal monster in your subconscious. The text insists a man must be as fearless with his sexual desire as he is with his spiritual desire. It makes this wild leap, claiming that the willingness to completely lose oneself in the terrifying ecstasy of physical love is literal training for losing oneself in divine oneness.
That is the core spiritual thesis of the book. The physical act of letting go of all control, all boundaries, and all polite masks with a trusted partner is the training ground for letting go of the ego in a cosmic spiritual context.
Speaking of desire, we have to talk about how the text views a man's attraction to other women. Because the book does not pretend that once you are in a relationship, you suddenly go blind. It claims that a masculine man will inevitably be attracted to feminine radiance wherever he goes. He will feel the pull of a beautiful woman on the street, at the grocery store, at the coffee shop. It is a constant biological and energetic reality.
And this is where the text warns against two very common extremes. The first extreme is acting foolishly on it, betraying your partner, creeping women out, or becoming a slave to your lust. The second extreme, which the author argues is just as damaging, is suppressing the attraction out of deep shame.
Wait, explain that to me. Why is feeling shame about noticing a beautiful woman damaging?
Because if a man feels intense shame merely for noticing and appreciating the beauty of a woman, the text argues he is energetically emasculating himself. He is condemning his own core nature. The attraction is not inherently evil. It is simply his masculine code recognizing and responding to the feminine life force. If he tries to shut that recognition off, he shuts off his own vitality.
So if I'm understanding this, if he can't act on it without ruining his life, and he shouldn't suppress it with shame, what is the middle path? What is the actual practice?
The text provides a highly specific internal mechanism for this. When a man is walking down the street and feels that sudden, intense wave of lust or attraction toward a passing woman, he is instructed not to let it stagnate in his mind as a dirty fantasy, and not to let it pool purely as genital arousal. Instead, he must consciously breathe that surge of energy up through his entire body.
He uses it as fuel.
Yes,
Ugh.
he takes in the beauty, he feels the sudden physical enlivenment and the spike in his heart rate, and then he consciously converts that heightened raw energy into a gift of inspiration. He takes that spark and channels it directly back into his life's purpose. He uses the encounter not as a reason to feel guilty, but as a slingshot to fuel his own mission and give a greater gift back to the world.
That is a fascinating mental martial art. And while we are on the topic of attraction, the text makes a really interesting and potentially contentious distinction about age. It notes that masculine men are often heavily drawn to young women, but it recontextualizes why that is. It says young women offer a very specific, fresh, rejuvenative energy, but it cautions men not to reduce this to mere superficial sexual titillation. They should honor it as a specific, energetic gift of youth.
And conversely, it highlights the profound power of older women. The text states that a man who is disconnected from his own internal depth will only ever be able to appreciate the skin-deep, obvious beauty of youth. He will be blind to anything else. But a man who is deeply connected to his core, who has lived at his edge, will be absolutely awed by the deep magic, the hard-won wisdom, and the profound radiance of an older woman.
The book describes it as a radiance that goes far beyond superficial appearance.
It does. It describes the mature feminine as having a capacity to love that allows her entire body to be moved by life force itself. There should be no comparison between the two. The text argues that each age provides its own specific vital energetic value, and a superior man is capable of honoring both without degrading either.
That is a powerful reframe of how our youth-obsessed society typically views aging and attraction. Okay. Moving into the final structural concepts of the book, Part 7 details some incredibly specific body practices, and we simply cannot do a deep dive into this framework without addressing its stance on physical intimacy, specifically its very intense views on male ejaculation.
Oh boy. This is arguably the most controversial and yet foundational cornerstone of the text's philosophy on maintaining masculine energy. The source material argues, quite literally, that frequent ejaculation massively depletes the masculine life force.
It's an essentialist biological claim. How does the author explain the mechanics of that depletion?
The text observes that for a man, ejaculation is typically followed by a refractory period, a state of what the author calls death-like peace or profound emptiness. The tension is gone, the man rolls over, and he often falls asleep. While this provides temporary, highly effective relief from the stress of daily life, the text claims that if done frequently, it chronically weakens the man's physical vitality, his drive to conquer his purpose, and his overall spiritual presence. He is literally spilling his drive out of his body.
And the book argues this doesn't just hurt the man's career drive, it damages the energetic fabric of the relationship itself. It claims that at a very subtle, almost subconscious level, if a man loses his energy easily and collapses into sleep every time they are intimate, his feminine partner feels that he cannot be trusted.
Because if she can so easily deplete him with just her physical presence, then the chaotic, demanding world outside will surely crush him. She needs to know he can handle intense energy without collapsing.
So the proposed solution the book offers is for men to learn the biological and spiritual practice of separating the feeling of orgasm from the physical act of ejaculation.
Yes, the practice outlined involves deeply esoteric techniques, using specific breathing patterns, intense focus, and pelvic floor contractions to intercept the stimulated energy right before the point of no return. Instead of letting it release outward, the man pulls that intense kinetic energy up his spine and into his brain and heart.
The text uses this incredible phrase. It describes transforming a depleting physical release into a rejuvenating lightning bolt of love. It says this practice rains down ambrosial bliss through the entire body. Practically speaking, it allows a man to make love for as long as he desires, remaining entirely full of energy, hyper-present, and deeply connected to his partner rather than just using her body to achieve a quick stress release before passing out.
But the text adds a critical, non-negotiable caveat here. This isn't just a mechanical tantric party trick. The author stresses that if the man's heart is closed, if he is just doing this to show off his stamina, but he isn't actually flooding his partner with love, the energy will remain obstructed. Love is the ultimate governor of the energy. Without an open heart, the physical techniques are useless.
This raises a really important practical question, though, which the text attempts to address in its final section on the yoga of intimacy. Let's look at the board we've set up. You have a man who is entirely focused on his life's mission, maintaining his unperturbable consciousness and guarding his life force. And you have a woman who is entirely focused on the chaotic flow of love, creating emotional storms and seeking oceanic energy. How do these two wildly different, seemingly incompatible creatures actually live in the same house for 20 years without driving each other to absolute madness?
The text calls this inherent friction the primary asymmetry. The foundational truth of a polarized relationship is that the man's ultimate priority is his mission, and the woman's ultimate priority is the flow of love. The only key to long-term coexistence is that both partners must consciously, actively support this imbalance.
Meaning, they have to stop trying to make the other person value what they value.
Exactly. The man cannot expect his feminine partner to prioritize his career goals over her need for daily, loving connection. He cannot get mad when she interrupts his work to ask for a hug, and conversely, the woman cannot expect the man to prioritize the relationship over his life's deepest purpose. She cannot get mad when he has to go to the metaphorical war.
And because they are operating on such fundamentally different wavelengths, the text insists they cannot get all their emotional and energetic needs met solely by each other. This brings us to the necessity for separate restoration.
If they spend too much time isolated together, trying to be everything for each other, they will inevitably neutralize their polarity. They will slide back into the 50-50 roommate phase. To prevent this, they must polarize apart.
The book outlines very different restoration protocols. For a man, he rediscovers and fine-tunes his masculine edge in solitude. He needs the cave. He needs austerity. The text says he needs to occasionally cut out all the soft comforts of domestic life. No TV, no rich foods, no easy distractions. He needs to spend time in the challenging, unforgiving company of other men who will not tolerate his excuses and will hold him accountable to his highest purpose.
He has to go sharpen the blade. But a woman with a feminine essence restores her radiance in completely the opposite environment. Austerity will starve her. She needs absolute abandon, fullness, and celebration. The text advises that she should spend time immersed in the energy of other women, dancing, singing, talking over each other, and flowing in pure pleasure without having to make any logical sense or fulfill a specific linear purpose.
The dance floor versus the silent mountain. By separating into these extreme, pure states of their core essences, they recharge the batteries. So when they finally come back together in the home, the magnetic attraction is pulling at maximum capacity.
That is the architecture of the entire system. They polarize apart to attract together.
So what does this all mean? If we pull the camera all the way back and look at everything we've covered in this deep dive into the way of the superior man, the core, uncompromising message of the source material is that true spiritual and sexual mastery does not come from a socially polite, perfectly equitable 50-50 neutrality. It does not come from pretending we are all exactly the same in our core primal desires.
According to this framework, true mastery comes from radically, fearlessly leaning into our core essence. If you possess a masculine essence, it demands a relentless, lifelong drive for fearless presence, a willingness to open your heart while it is being crushed by pain, and a commitment to prioritize your deepest purpose above all else. If you possess a feminine essence, it demands embracing your boundless, terrifying capacity for love, honoring your oceanic energy, and trusting your intuitive radiance without ever apologizing for your emotional weather.
The text views intimacy not as a safe, quiet harbor where you get to hide from the world and be comfortable, but as an intense, incredibly demanding crucible for spiritual growth. It is an ongoing, daily practice of testing each other, ravishing each other, surrendering, and constantly forcing the heart to open wider in the face of fear.
Which leaves us with a final, highly provocative thought to ponder as we wrap up. The text is absolutely adamant that human passion is entirely dependent on the friction of opposites, this stark masculine and feminine polarity. But let's look at the real world. As our modern society continues its relentless, heavily incentivized march toward total behavioral and social sameness across all spheres of life, in the corporate workplace, in domestic duties, and in our media, what happens to that magnetic charge?
If we successfully eradicate the traditional expressions of masculine and feminine energies in our noble quest for ultimate equality, will human biology and psychology eventually be forced to invent entirely new, unrecognized forms of polarity just to satisfy our hardwired biological craving for passionate friction?
It's a fascinating question. Could the concepts of masculine and feminine, as described in this book, eventually become obsolete, replaced by completely new archetypal energies that we haven't even named yet, just so we can feel the spark of difference again? Or is this ancient biological code so deeply embedded in our DNA that trying to socially engineer our way out of it will only ever lead to a culture of burned out, passionless roommates?
It is a phenomenal question about the future of human intimacy, and one that this book certainly forces you to wrestle with. Thank you so much for pulling up a chair and joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We hope it gave you plenty to chew on, whether you agreed with every word or wanted to throw the book across the room. Keep exploring the edges of your own understanding, keep asking the hard questions, and we will see you next time.